I'd like to call to order the King George County School Board regular meeting, October 26, 2020. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May be seated. First item on the agenda is the recognition VSBA Academy Awards.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, members of the community and staff, thank you for your attention and for the opportunity to recognize our school board members. Each year, the Virginia School Boards Association, or VSBA, as we commonly refer to the organization, recognize school board members around the state for their participation in professional development activities associated with their responsibilities as a school board. So I'm again happy to say that all of our school board members have taken time out of their days to participate in VSBA sponsored training and professional development as board members. We thought we'd like to take an opportunity to recognize you publicly and present you with the recognition certificates, and in some cases your PIN for the number of credits that you've earned through the VSBA professional development opportunities. So I'll go in just the certificates order here to recognize each of you. Let me just announce your certificate, and then I'll walk down and present each of you your certificate. But to Ms. Gail Hawk is receiving the Award of Honor. Ms. Kristen Tolliver is receiving the Award of Excellence. Ms. Pansera, Award of Recognition, as is Ms. Gonzalez, and Mr. Collins, all receiving the Award of Recognition. So again, I want to emphasize these levels of recognition are earned, not simply bestowed upon board members for their above and beyond participation in training and development that they have volunteered to take their time out of their day to complete. So we appreciate your commitment to the school board and your commitment to yourselves as board members and your willingness to continuously seek opportunities to become better board members for our community. So thank you on behalf of our community, and I'll just walk down and present you with your certificates, and I'll give you an elbow bump. How's that? Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, we have our public and employee comment. I just want to briefly state that an individual will be called out of order if any profanity is spoken or any defamatory of an individual, of the staff of King George County School, or a parent. If an individual is called out of order, their remaining time will be forfeited and they will be asked to take a seat. If they are called out of order for a second time, they will be asked to leave, and if necessary, escorted by the King George County's deputy. At any time, if an individual becomes disruptive, they may be called out of order and asked to leave the meeting, and if necessary, will be escorted by the King George County deputy. Ms. Rinko, do we have a list of public comment? Tonight we have Ms. Dee Strauss.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, school board members, Dr. Benson and staff, and members of the audience, both live and virtual. My name is Dee Strauss. I'm a resident of King George County and the marketing teacher and DECA advisor at King George High School. I want to say again that I love teaching and what I do with students in class and outside of class. I'm very proud and happy to be part of the King George County school system and especially King George High School. I want to encourage the board and staff to continue to weigh the risk versus benefit for what our future in the coming weeks and months will look like at King George County schools. I continue to encourage you to consider even one possible risk of just one outbreak or positive test result of COVID-19 in our school family as something that is not just possible, but probable and inevitable. We have seen this already without students in the buildings. I have heard other speakers talk about King George being in the low risk area, according to the CDC and Health Department, but is it worth the risk of even one illness or worse among our school family? I ask that you review the Spotsylvania County Public School COVID-19 dashboard for the number of cases and quarantines they are dealing with on an ongoing basis. The website is www.spotsylvania.k12.va.us/page/5185. Last week, there were 6 active cases among the staff and 13 active cases among the students. These numbers may not seem like much given the number of students and staff at Spotsylvania County Schools, but if just one of those active cases turns deadly, what if it happened here in our school family? Please know that I still support 100% virtual learning through the rest of this fall semester with discussion at upcoming meetings of how to approach the spring semester of 2021. But also know that whatever you determine after weighing the risk and the benefit, I will be wherever I need to be to teach the children of King George. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Strauss. Mr. Vance, do we have anybody online wishing to make a comment? 3 people. Thank you. First up is Yvonne Richard.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Yvonne Richard, and I hope the board will take to heart what I have to say and make some changes about how things are being handled. First, I highly encourage you not to make changes to the agenda that push public comment to after discussion items. My reason for requesting is simply that you have stated as a board you want to hear from staff and citizens, and moving public comment later in the meeting agenda requires citizens to spend hours waiting to share their concerns with the board. Some are not able to attend in person, but once it is their turn to speak online, there are technical issues getting unmuted and then they lose their turn. Second, the citizens and the staff are watching and listening to you. And when you fight with one another, mute one another, and refuse to postpone meetings until all board members are present and vote on discussion items, you're not allowing the citizens you represent to be heard. Additionally, as TC pointed out this summer, some of these actions are illegal. As for returning students to the classrooms in grades K through 2, I beg you to require a 6-foot social distancing to be followed as Dr. Benson presented in July. Reducing our distance to only 3 feet puts everyone at risk. Additionally, caps should be placed on the number of students that can be in a virtual classroom because 30 students in a virtual classroom is still too much. And I would like to remind you that in July 13th at the board meeting, Dr. Benson said that if the number of cases in King George County increases over 5 consecutive days, the schools will be closed for a minimum of 14 days. In the event of a closure, all students would revert to distance learning until all schools are reopened. Our numbers are going up every single day. How are we going to address this? I'd like to ask some other questions as well, like what will happen when a bus driver gets sick and we have no sub-bus drivers? How will substitutes be handled, and will they be able to go between multiple schools and multiple classrooms? Have our current substitutes been asked if they're willing to sub in these situations? What type of training will the substitutes get on COVID-19 and PPE? Will and are cleaning protocols actually being followed, since they were not being followed when we were at the last meeting and not waiting the 10 minutes between spraying the cleaner and wiping it off. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Samantha Hubble.
Hello.
Yes.
My name is Samantha Hubble, 9121 Doe Run Lane. My son is behind. I know everybody wants to talk about statistics and everything. I've talked to my doctor about it. I've looked at the data. I want my child back in school because he's behind. And my child is not the only one behind. Obviously, what we're doing right now is it's not exactly getting them where they need to be. And I'm doing everything I can do to help my child. On Wednesdays mornings, I'm doing as I'm told. I'm logging in, I'm sitting down with my child, and I'm helping him and doing everything I can do. I'm putting in the extra work. My husband is also putting in the extra work. We're sitting down with him. We're reading with him. We're having him practice reading. And it's still obviously not working. And we're putting in the work. What about the children with parents that aren't? That's my worry. Because there are kids out there whose parents don't care and aren't helping them. What are they going to do? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Tamara Gillespie. I had a few comments I wanted to make. The school being open, we know the numbers are going up. We know there's going to be a risk. There was a comment made at the last meeting about it was the parents' decision if they wanted to do it. And that concerns me because really it comes to the board's decision. If someone dies, if this happens and there's illness and death, it's not just a parent's risk. It's the board that's saying, we want to do this. And a number of you said, we're not taking responsibility. Unfortunately, and this is awful because COVID is awful, it does fall on the responsibility. We also have teachers that have to go in if you tell them they're going in, and their lives are at risk, and it's something you all are gambling with, and that's a real big danger. Nobody wants to leave everybody at home. Everybody wants to get back in school, but we also want to be safe. We have snow days, we don't go in. Now, not everybody's going to get hurt in a snow day. A lot of the times we see roads here that are safe, but it's closed for those few people that wouldn't be safe because we don't want those deaths on our hands. We're looking at the same thing, and we don't want teachers' deaths or students' deaths on our hands. Doing everything at home, virtual, is not great for everybody, but it is working and it's keeping people safe. If we do go back to school, one of the concerns that I have is there's a number of teachers, and I hope you all are listening to them because they don't feel safe. They're looking for new jobs and they want out with not feeling safe in this. That's dangerous for future years. I know your comment last year, someone's comment last meeting had been, we're working for the parents, but we're also working for students and teachers. And if we leave our teachers vulnerable and they leave next year, we don't have what we need to give to our students, which means you have parents just as upset. There's a lot of parents, I like to use this analogy. I wouldn't give my child ice cream for dinner even though they want it because they're going to be sick later. Right now we have parents asking for ice cream for dinner because they don't want this hardship right now. And I get that, but there's going to be a lot worse happening later if you give them the ice cream for dinner. This is hard, but we need to continue virtual. We need to keep everyone safe. It's far more important than anything else that everyone comes out of this alive, and that's a risk I'm not willing to gamble, and I hope none of you are either. Thank you.
Thank you. So move on to changes to the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, staff requests that the minutes from the October 5th meeting be removed from the consent agenda for some minor adjustments. We'll bring them back to you next time.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have the meeting minutes of September 14th, 2020 regular meeting and the meeting of September 28th, 2020 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move that we approve the consent agenda as amended. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Consent agenda has been approved. The meeting minutes for September 14th and September 28th are approved. Next, we'll move on to the discussion items. We have the 2020 advisory committees.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Each year, the school board supports the creation of advisory committees to be used as the board needs to. We have 5 standing advisory committees: Special Education Advisory Committee, Gifted and Talented Advisory, Technology Advisory, Health Advisory, and the Title I Advisory Committees. In your packet, you've got a listing of staff and community members who have graciously volunteered to serve on these advisory committees this year. And we just asked the board's consideration for approval of these members this year. It is a discussion item, so
Is there any
have that approved next meeting if you choose.
is there any discussion? Any comments?
Forgive me, I failed to mention the CTE Advisory Committee, I believe, in my opening comments. My apologies. 6 committees, I'm sorry.
Okay. We can move on to review the agenda format. So I have reviewed the agendas, made some minor changes. The biggest one is just the changes to the agenda will be moved up right after the moment of silence. I have to pass these out to everybody. The other one is adding an invocation with the moment of silence as an option. Talking to Dr. Benson, we're going to look at the legality issues behind that. Should we pass it on? And then there are 3 before we had the regular meeting. No, all 3 packets. No, all of them, guys. It's the whole thing, the packet.
Oh,
So there's 3.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Pass both of those to Dr. Benson.
there's 3. There's 3. Yes.
And then this is mine.
Yeah. So there is the regular meeting,
Thank
the
you.
special meeting, and then the work session meeting are 3 separate agendas. Before we had 2 agendas. Yeah. We had the regular meeting, the work session, and the special meeting was combined as one. So if everybody wants to just look over that, we won't take up too much time this evening. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them to me. And then based on those questions or comments, we'll go ahead and put it on either the action item for our next regular meeting.
Can we ask simple question now?
Sure.
What did you say a minute ago about reviewing the legality of something?
For the invocation. I have the moment of silence and the invocation.
Oh.
So some of the school boards, I know Caroline has a prayer. There is some legality issues with separation of church and state, but since we're a legislative body, we are exempt from that, but we're just going to check into that to make sure. And it would be as an option, not as, so we could either do a moment of prayer, a moment of silence, or an invocation if somebody wanted to do that.
Okay.
All right, so moving on to employee childcare.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the board. You know that since the pre-planning week, we have been fortunate enough to secure funding through the County CARES Act funds to support a child care service for our employees so that we may conduct school. It's of critical importance. It's certainly valued, I know, and the employees whose children are being cared for certainly appreciate having a place for their children to be cared for so that they can conduct the business that we need them to conduct to make our system run. So I am asking that you consider allowing me or authorizing me to then execute a contract with the YMCA to extend our child care services for our staff through January 14th. 2021 at a cost not to exceed $192,150. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Anybody have any questions?
Isn't that expiring? Don't we have to?
It does. I'm working with the YMCA. There was a week, or there was actually a week or two where we have holidays and that type of thing. So they're able to credit back for the time being. But your consideration and hopeful eventual approval would allow this to continue. And I will emphasize it is necessary that remember that employees, because of the status of their school, if their school is closed, so to speak, on certain days for their children, they are entitled to leave from the federal level, which would make it very difficult for us to fulfill the mission of the school. So I appreciate your understanding and your support in advance.
So I had a question.
Yep.
So the fee, is that based on students per day, or is it based on the capacity of the classroom per teacher or child care giver?
I don't want to speak for Ms. Williams and the YMCA. I know that at the beginning when it was designed, we did do a survey and we gave her an estimated, and I believe the price is estimated on about 130 to 140 students receiving care. So I believe their cost is based, you could break it out on a per student per day, but their cost is really the cost for their personnel and any cost that they have. So I'm not sure how they broke it out. If they calculate it per day, per student, I'd have to ask her for how the calculus behind their pricing. But that is the pricing they gave me for the 9-week period.
I'd just be curious as to if a teacher wanted to bring their child in and on a Monday for one day, and then they would be able to do that, or they have to commit to every Monday or every day, how that works.
No, I don't believe so. I believe they just need to pre-register so they can plan accordingly. But there's no need to pay any fee or that type of thing, or feel as though they would not be part of the program in general.
Gotcha.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Dr. Benson, where is this money coming from? Is it coming out of the new allocation of $777,000?
It would.
So discussing that 777, the 192 coming out of that, 192,000. I guess this is the best time to bring this forward, since you're going to go to 192 for that. I'd like to add in for that 777,000, 90,000 for testing, 300,000 for additional cleaning, and 195,000 for HEPA or ionization filters. So these are the top 3 things that the staff have talked about in regards to feeling unsafe. So that would hit every one of those.
Okay, so I believe we can have that discussion a little bit further after the presentation of the instructional plan review.
Okay, but so you're going to pull the 192 out of the 777 already?
We're not voting.
I'm just asking.
Discussion at this.
So next meeting, it would be on action for the 192 out of the 777, but we haven't discussed any of the other parts of it. So you're automatically taking 192 off of that. So that's why I threw those in there.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, so just to clarify, Dr. Benson, we are continuing with it as we stand right now, even though we have not formally voted on it, correct?
That's true. It would be helpful to be authorized to then engage with the YMCA, though, to continue those services for our staff. So I appreciate that. It's up to you if you want to discuss an item, obviously. So we can wait till the next meeting, but I do need to at least enter into discussions with the YMCA.
Dr. Benson, when does the current service end with the funding that's already been provided to the authorized for the YMCA?
Yeah, and again, I understand I'm working cooperatively with Ms. Williams and the YMCA and their local organization. So I think they're working with us, not to presume anything on the board, but to try to make sure that we continue that service. So I think the technical expiration is this week. But again, we're working with like credits and things like that for holidays, that type of thing, to try to bridge the time being. We've had, unfortunately, a need to delay this meeting. So it didn't work out quite as we had hoped it would timing wise. But I do need to get with them, or they at least need to. If there's concern about it, I guess I should put it that way. We should know now so that I can relay that to them. Otherwise, I'm certainly understand that you may want to have it wait for your constituents to weigh in. But barring that, I believe they would continue to work and then just wait for the board to meet again if that was your choice to approve it at that time or consider it for approval at that time.
So then can we just say that we will have another meeting next Monday? We will add a work session at time. We can bring this up for vote.
Yeah, I'll certainly bring it back to you very next meeting you have. That doesn't mean you have to have that meeting, but whatever the board decides in terms of a next meeting, I'd certainly bring it back then.
Is that something that we would want to look at?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would like to say clearly that childcare it is a primary concern for our teachers, our staff, and all components of the school system. Unless they know that we're committed to that, then I think it sows a lot of seeds of discontent. So I really would like to say from my perspective that childcare is a primary first use of those funds. Thank you.
Okay. Oh yeah. So I concur with Ms. Hawk, and as such, I'd like to move that we authorize Dr. Benson to execute a contract with the YMCA to extend the childcare services for staff through January 14th, 2021 at a cost not to exceed $192,150.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Well, you're pulling out almost $200,000 out of the $777,000. You haven't even breached into the other $500,000. So I would think that would be a premature decision until you consider the totality of the entire amount. Well, what the purpose of that is to give the teachers childcare for their children so they can basically teach. So I think we should bridge the entire gap to the 777 instead of just partial of it.
So if teachers can't teach, how are we, if they can't teach because their children need childcare services, how are we providing services to our students?
So the teachers are coming to school and they have voiced adamant concerns about several things. One of them is the air filtration. Spoke with Dr. Benson. He said that it's certified to industry standards, but that doesn't make them satisfied with the air. So that's why I proposed the filtration system that's available on market. And the second thing that they're concerned about is cleaning. So that's why I would want to put in the $300,000 for contract cleaning, and the $90,000 it would be for the testing for the teachers and staff to have some measures where they can find out if they're okay. It's usually a contract through the local healthcare agencies where they can go over and get the test. So I think that you need to think about the totality of it and not just the 192. So if you're just going to vote on the 192, which happens to be a discussion item, unless you consider the whole 777, I would not be interested, because we're trying to get the folks, the teachers who have emailed us over and over again to feel comfortable with to be in that school. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Madam Chair,
So
I'd like to respond to that also. And I certainly, I have received those same emails. with a number of those items. But I'll be honest, primary in the concerns that I've received has been childcare, which is, I know, not a typical provision for companies to provide. I think in this case we can and should go ahead with that opportunity at the appropriate time. I agree with the discussion model that if we can voice our ideas at this point and vote at the next meeting when it's an action item, will be in keeping with Robert's rules, etc. I do have a little concern about our levels of responsibility. I'd like to wait. I mean, those are all good topics. They're all good additions, but I'd really like to wait and see what Dr. Benson's presenting it. And there may be a need for air filtration, extra cleaning, and additional testing, but we don't know yet. So I'd like to give that an opportunity to occur and then bring back this discussion, Mr. Collins, if that's okay.
I agree with Ms. Hawk, and Mr. Collins, I agree with you as well, but I think we've already committed to the first 9 weeks, and I think with some assumption that we will continue that. We have the funding, and I think Dr. Benson, in a matter of timeliness, needs to be able to go ahead and, as you said, negotiate with the Y. So I think we can discuss those other things further. So I think you're bringing up some things that are very important, but that we haven't even had a chance to discuss when we've already been providing the child care.
Just one more thing to add. So the child care serves some employees. The rest of it serves all the employees. So I'm not against the child care. Don't get me wrong there. But what I'm saying, there's two things. One, we should consider it as a whole. And two, it shouldn't be on an action item when it's in discussion on the agenda. But it's already received a motion and a second.
Well,
So
been voted on.
right, hadn't been voted on. So I would have a tendency to say nay just because of those two items. But
So that's,
I'm not against the child care is what I'm saying.
I'm not against it either. Dr. Benson, the $770,000 CARES Act, have we already spent the 300 that we've gotten plus what we've gotten from the county? So would
No.
any of this be able to be expensed through those other care funds that are available?
Yes, I think if you give me an opportunity to then at a future meeting talk about the different revenue sources, because the different revenue sources have different timelines associated with them in terms of the need to expend funds. So I'm doing my very best. I'm working with Ms. Williams to make sure that
Okay, excuse me, Dr. Benson. There's some chatter in the audience. I'm having a hard time understanding Dr. Benson. Could we please keep it down? Thank you.
Might be from up top,
I'm not sure.
online stuff.
I have hearing issues, so it's hard to keep it. Thank you.
So anyway, with the different timelines for spending, I think it's only prudent that we make sure that we leverage the funding that's being made available to us to maximize what we can procure in terms of services and goods within those time limits. So all that to say, we've obviously got different revenue. We have school cares that came first. We could spend that over 2 fiscal years. We have our county has graciously afforded us some county cares money that needs to be obligated by December 1 for our joint meeting that we had. I don't know if goods need to be received by December 1. I don't think so, but we need to have obligated that funding. I do think goods need to be received by the end of the calendar year in that case. And then this most recent round, the 777 that you're referencing, also comes with a end of December spend down deadline. And my understanding thus far is that spend down deadline includes the actual either the conducting of the services or the procurement of the goods. We're still waiting clarification from the federal level to see if that is indeed the case. But as of now, that's my understanding. So all that to say, we've tried to thus far be strategic in making sure that expenditures that we've already made or that we are making currently, that we're coding them kind of along the same timeline in terms of what is most urgent in terms of this new CRF funding, we're calling it, and the School Cares Act. You know, things that we committed to the School Cares originally, because we have a longer time to spend that, we're looking to go back and recode those expenditures to the funding that must be expended sooner. Does that make sense? So I think it would be beneficial if I can kind of lay out for you how we're trying to strategically utilize that funding. You know, there's in the example I'm providing, let's say the hotspots, the original hotspots we need to procure right away, obviously. So we committed School Cares Act funding. Well, now that the CRF funding has come, we may have an opportunity then to free up that obligation on the Schools Cares Act and code it to the CRF funding. That way, the money is still there. It's just categorized differently, and it affords us greater flexibility to address future needs as well. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I agree with Mr. Collins. It's good to look at it not only as a whole for the 777, but possibly to make sure that we understand all the different pieces of the revenue funding that have been made available here in the short term, and how we can maximize then the use of each of them.
So
So
the
then-
December 1st is for the second one too, or December, the $777,000,
No, sir. December 1st, my understanding was the county cares. They
Right, I
wanted
got
to
that.
know by that date.
right? How about the 777,000?
That one I believe is December 30th, but we're still waiting.
December. So that's a short order.
Can-
So you need to decide where it's going and then get the contracts and have it done by December 30th, and it's almost November.
Yeah, and I agree as far as, but even the contracts, you know, if the services that are to be rendered as a result of the contracts aren't delivered by that December 30 is our current concern and understanding, but that's where we're trying to seek clarification. Is the obligation of the funds, does that satisfy the timeline, or must the services actually be rendered by December 30? That is still something we're
For
trying to
example,
clarify.
with a testing package, would it be sufficient to commit to a contract of testing from January 1 through June 30? Would that qualify as expended, or would it have to be done, the testing have to be done prior?
Right, that's a good example. No, you know, hypothetically, if you had a testing contract, no, we could not use the CRF funding, certainly not the county cares funding, because we didn't stipulate that was one of the uses
Right,
we would use
right.
that money for. But
Right, but for the additional,
the additional 770, we could not use that as we understand it now. Again, it's relatively fluid because it's relatively new, but
Yeah.
as we understand it now, no, those services would have to have been delivered prior to December
Yeah.
30th, which doesn't seem.
So the county is doing testing for their employees and or giving them an option for testing. They have a contract. So they're using the CARES money for that. And I wouldn't think that would expire on December 30th.
Again, I think you've seen the email from Dr. Young. I think he has an opinion. We're trying to get clarification as to whether that is the case or not. I wish I could tell you definitively that's, you know, but we are truly, I think many divisions and counties are trying to seek clarification about that language and the guidance issued at the federal level.
Ms. Tolliver?
Yeah, just one comment. So we're talking about childcare specifically, and I know all these other things need to come into play, but had we met last week, this would have been a discussion item and it would have been on for action tonight. So just a point of clarification.
So is it,
well, it's up,
Is there-
it's
yeah.
been moved and seconded.
right, so we're in discussion. So so the 192,150 was based on us being 100% virtual. Is there any chances that that number would come down if some of the teachers opted to have their children in person? Because we are going in that grade level where they would be.
It was not based on us being 100% virtual. It was simply based on the fact that we had employees who needed childcare for their children to do their job, to make whatever instructional model we had adopted work. So no, I don't anticipate there would be a change or a difference
So
from the first 9 week cost.
So then is there any way that we could change the motion that we would approve the child care and then have a better understanding maybe in our work session so that we can itemize out where the money is coming from so that we can make sure that it's allotted properly? Is that an option?
Madam Chair, what does that change?
Well, that way we would know exactly where the funding is coming and have a better understanding instead of just saying that we're going to take $192,150 out of a fund that we may need for other items. And then that would give Dr. Benson a little bit more time to make sure that there's other avenues that we could possibly move.
So you'd be dropping that, so the available then would be 582.
Well, we could also amend the motion to just allow Dr. Benson to continue to pursue negotiations with the YMCA.
Right.
Without a dollar amount to it. They could do that.
That's kind of what
I
I'm
would
moving
like
towards.
that.
You'd be okay with that?
Would,
Yeah.
may I ask Dr. Benson, if that were the case, would that allow, do we run a risk of childcare services being interrupted between now and the next meeting?
I'm not the YMCA, so I can't necessarily answer for them. I know they've worked in good faith with us, and they're a great partner. They've done an exceptional job. I'm just not that side of the table, so it's tough for me to speak for them to answer your question. I know it's expiring, and I guess if the worry is that there's a limited amount or limited availability from the single revenue source for other interests that may be added to the child care. Keep in mind what I talked about is that if we're able to free previous obligations from, let's say, Schools Cares Act, the funding is still available. It's simply utilizing the funding streams that are most time sensitive as soon as we can to make sure we meet those deadlines. So if there was funding, let's say, I forget the cost of the hotspots. Let's say if the hotspots were $180,000 that were charged against the School Cares Act, we're now then going to charge those. Instead, we're going to recode that charge from School Cares to the new CRF funding because it must be spent sooner. So in essence, we freed up the very same amount of money we're obligating for the CRF. We've freed up on the School Cares Act side. That money's still available for interests that you have. You're not losing capacity in terms of the revenue. It's just simply recoding to a different revenue stream that must be spent sooner than the School Cares Act. Does that help? Did I explain that?
Yeah,
So you
I
said
just think it'd
that
be
you're,
helpful if we had a work session to discuss all of the funding, like you're
In other words, it's not
discussing,
going to
so that
limit
we can.
your debate about items that you believe we should look into. It's not going to limit you financially. I'm simply suggesting we shift this to an expense, to a revenue source that needs to be spent in a more timely fashion than School Cares money. That's all.
so there was going to be a meeting next Monday, right? We're supposed to have a meeting every Monday. And so you wouldn't make a difference a week because the contract doesn't run out in a week, right?
So Madam Chair,
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So with all due respect to Mr. Collins' comment about having meetings every week, we also agreed to that quite some time ago, and we have not met for 3 weeks. So in the spirit of the dealing and properly addressing time-sensitive issues, this was a topic some time ago, and we've lost 3 weeks because we have not met. So it would seem to me to be prudent. The agenda item that we are discussing is childcare, not the entire budget, and not the entire CARES budget. And while I 100% agree that all of Mr. Collins' suggestions are valid and should be considered, I think we would have done well to have them on the agenda tonight if we wanted to have that conversation. And I also think it would have been advantageous to have the discussion or the employee childcare topic addressed as an action item this evening. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So I may continue to stand by my motion to approve it in the spirit of attending to timely manners that directly impact the teachers that we are relying on providing service and education to our students.
Okay. So I guess we'll just go on with the vote. Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Chair votes nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have the instructional plan review.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board, for the opportunity to come back to you. At our last meeting, we discussed and you ultimately approved grade kindergarten through second grade, a plan or at least an idea that we look to bring those that chose back to school for a partial day in person, but that we also accommodate those who have a desire to remain, or for their students to remain 100% virtual. So in discussing that, you brought up a few things that we promised to bring back to you, and we do have information for you in response to your questions tonight. Go ahead, John, if you don't mind. Thank you. Just to outline tonight, we have health information that she requested. Ms. Mary Fisher, our supervisor of family services, is here. She has information for you. I know that you've got a hard copy in your folder, the white folder, of several documents she emailed to you as a packet. And then there's also a summary PowerPoint, and we will post all of this for the public or as a handout. But the summary PowerPoint, I believe, helps codify or direct a reader to the different documents that are contained within that pack. There's quite a bit of information there. I know you've had several days to have a chance to review that. Because it's so comprehensive, we wanted to get it to you early, give you a chance to review. I know Ms. Fisher's happy to answer any questions you may have relative to that information, but we didn't think it would be beneficial to go through page by page for you here in one moment, but rather give you the time to review it at your leisure and then have more in-depth conversations about any aspect that needed clarification. We do have, as part of the presentation, the flow charts, are the conceptualization that you all came up with to try to present responses for staff and responses for students who may prove symptomatic or even positive. She has graciously developed flow charts to help bring about greater understanding for you all and for our staff and community in those cases. Following that, I do have the updated VDH COVID metrics from the dashboard that VDH has developed in conjunction with the CDC. Those metrics I'll go over for you once Ms. Fisher finishes. And then we have updates specifically about the K2 proposal. We have numbers and teacher assignments that you requested by school, by grade. We have also included some example classroom pictures that you've discussed. And then lastly, I do have the, based on the survey results, we have the transportation utilization chart for you to look at, as that was another question that you had in closing the last meeting. So with that, that summary, that's what we're gonna present to you. I'll go ahead and start and ask Ms. Fisher if she'd be kind enough to take you through her bit of information, and I won't steal your thunder. I know you have.
Oh, that's okay. Actually, yeah, we'll go ahead. John, if you could go to my packet. So as Dr. Benson just explained, the next couple of slides you'll see are really just a summary of that packet of information I provided a couple weeks ago in preparation for this meeting. And because it is quite lengthy and comprehensive, I did summarize a couple of those pages tonight on this packet, and you should have hard copies of both of those. Go ahead, John. Oh, I think can you back up a page? There you go. Okay, so the first page of the packet that was provided to you all previously is a table of contents of the entire handout. And that is listed here for the public that's watching at home, so they know all of the information that is provided. As I reference it tonight, you know, they can go onto the King George County School Board website and find the entire packet. It is numbered at the bottom in red numbers, 1 of 34, 2 of 34, etc. So that's how I'll reference it tonight. And it should be numbered the same in your packets that you have in person here. So the first document in the packet is the health mitigation plan, which is what we're here tonight to really kind of talk about. We have our third version for you tonight that we'll be submitting to Video E with a few slight edits for our K-2 return to in-person instruction plan. We had to submit a phase 2 plan in July prior to beginning any in-person programs. We've had probably a dozen or so programs since July that we've had taking place so far under our phase 2 and then our initial phase 3 plan. So what you have in your packet now on pages 2 through 12 is the second version of phase 3 with some red line edits. showing a few slight variations in the plan for phase 3 as we return to in-person learning for K through 2. And again, that's on pages 2 through 12 of the 34-page packet. The biggest change in there that you'll see, the most significant edit, does have to do with the physical distancing, and that's on page 6 of 34. When the initial plan was submitted to the state, the CDC and 3R document from VDOE still had 6 feet as the mitigating strategy for physical distancing. And then the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with guidance that said minimum of 3 feet with additional mitigating strategies could be implemented effectively. And so we've adjusted our plan accordingly. Of course, as Dr. Benson has shared in previous meetings, there are times when we simply, because kids are kids, you can't ensure that there's going to be physical distancing at all times, but certainly to the extent possible, that would be our primary mitigating strategy for physical distancing. So questions about the edits to the health plan as provided in that document?
Hi, Ms. Fisher. Thank you for putting this together. Can I ask you a question about page 5? So on page 5, the third bullet or the third paragraph from the bottom, it says all staff members will receive training on triage and clinic needs, responding to minor non-emergent needs in the classroom, and identifying and responding to potential signs and symptoms of COVID-19. Designated staff will receive additional training on medication administration, cleaning and disinfecting of potentially exposed areas, and other identified training needs. I guess my question there was, does that mean that all staff are essentially being trained in some capacity to act as nurses? Kind of, or not really?
Not really. I'm not a nurse myself. And this really contains a lot of different information. So first of all, in a typical classroom pre-COVID, teachers respond to non-emergent first aid needs every day. They're required to be certified in first aid. So that's putting Band-Aids on, boo-boos, those sorts of things. So this is just a re-education of how to triage those needs so that a student that simply needs a Band-Aid can be managed in the classroom as opposed to being sent to the nurse's office who has to manage more intense needs, potential COVID, et cetera.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions about the plan itself?
I had another question. I was going to give folks a chance. Madam Chair, may I ask another question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I was trying to keep track here on slide 10, I think. Let me see. Don't want to get my notes
Yes, ma'am.
changed. So basically it said somewhere here that that had been addressed, that students are now going to be required to remain at home whenever sick. I guess going along with that, I know that the VDH guidelines had mentioned that, let me find my issue here. So as a part of the flow chart under the return to school and childcare, it said that if no clinical evaluation was performed, and then like the next step down on it was symptoms and no close contact and no exposure in the last 14 days to an area with greater than or equal to 50 cases per 100,000. So in King George, that would mean approximately, I think, 13 cases in the county, based on our number of residents. It says that students may return when there's no fever for 24 hours without fever-reducing medication. And I guess my question is, how do we enforce that? It seems to me like that's where the hole, and I know that's like the VDH process. If we don't require families that have symptomatic students to be tested or something so that the school receives feedback, how do we ensure that a student who has no fever or has been given medication is not returning to school that may potentially have COVID?
Okay, can you say the question one more time?
Yep. So, yeah, I know there was a lot there. So the guidance says, it kind of in keeping with our normal procedure, right? That if the student has no fever for 24 hours without fever reducing medication, that they can come back into the classroom, right?
Correct.
So my question is specifically pertaining to COVID-19, how do we enforce that? So if a student is symptomatic and they're sent home, but they don't have a fever and they come back, but we haven't received indication that that student has tested negative or positive or that they do not have COVID-19, how do we know that they're not returning to school, even if they're asymptomatic, but
Okay,
potentially?
so I think I'm following you, and I actually put 2 different documents in here for that specific reason.
Okay.
So if you look at page 22, it is a black and white flow chart from the VDH. It's the original flow chart that they put out for students returning to school. And at the very bottom, in red, you'll see if alternate diagnosis, etc. And then it talks about no clinical evaluation. So that was the original VDH algorithm that said if there is no clinical evaluation, then it's either going to be a 10-day isolation or a 14-day quarantine, dependent upon the circumstances. The change came from VDH on the next page, where, as you've just expressed on page 23, the newest algorithm, based upon your local area's rate of infection, adds an additional layer where a student could return after 24 hours if they have no symptoms or fever. We've discussed this within the division, and we, as part of our plan, are reverting to the original VDH algorithm, which removes the case, the rate of cases in the area. And let me try to explain that a little bit more. So if you look at that on page 23, that requires that schools determine over the past 14 days whether a student showing symptoms has been anywhere. That doesn't mean just King George, but anywhere where there has been cases greater than 50 per 100,000 population. That's a near impossibility. And so we have removed that internally, locally. We have chosen to remove that as an option. And so we are not considering where they've been. It's going to remain the original VDH protocol. Okay. You're either out for 10 days or 14, dependent upon your symptoms and circumstance. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess I'm still stuck on if no clinical evaluation is performed. So the flow chart, if I understand it correctly, you start at the top, is your child sick with symptoms of COVID-19? Yes, you go down through here, so on and so forth. Return to school and childcare if no clinical evaluation is performed. So I guess that would mean a child is symptomatic and they do not go get a clinical evaluation. So you don't know. So you don't know if they do or do not have COVID, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we're saying you're going to remove the area thing. I get that. But so if there hasn't been a clinical evaluation, we know that people can be asymptomatic. But it would seem that based on this, unless if an alternate diagnosis is not provided, which I guess.
So you don't go to the doctor at all. You don't get diagnosed with strep, with the flu,
right.
with a cold, with COVID, you get
right.
nothing.
Right, but okay, but you're symptomatic, but you don't have a fever, but you can come back to school. Is that correct?
No, ma'am.
No.
Because on page 23, all the way at the bottom, under the 3 yellow arrow,
yep.
if no, that very first option is no longer an option in King George County Schools. We have removed that as an option completely.
Okay, so if someone has symptoms, they have to stay home for 10 days?
For either 10 days or 14 days, depending on their exposure.
Depending on what?
Their potential for exposure. So either there's potential that you were exposed, and that's a 14-day quarantine under VDH and CDC guidelines, or if there's no known exposure, then it's a 10-day isolation.
And what is say the last part, if there's
no known exposure.
No
You're
known
just
exposure,
having
but you
symptoms.
have symptoms. Okay, So if someone has symptoms, they're not going to come back to school even if they're fever-free for 24 hours.
Correct.
Okay.
For either 10 or 14 days.
Okay. Okay. That I guess wasn't
Correct.
entirely
If they have,
clear.
yeah, if they have not had a medical diagnosis, but if they have a medical diagnosis and they've been tested and they're tested negative for COVID, then they can return after 24 hours after their fever has gone.
Depending on what their other diagnosis is.
Right. Well, yeah.
You know, if
obviously,
strep
of
is a
course.
7-day,
No, yes.
exactly.
So just to return back, because there's folks online, I just want to make sure it's clear. So you talked about the training. I've asked about that. If the staff has been trained for that block of instruction, I think there was a virtual training. I just want to make sure. I asked Dr. Benson. He said, yes, they were trained. I just want to make sure that clear that they have been trained.
Yes, and actually if you, John, if you can go to, I don't even know what it is now, 5 maybe, the 5th slide, and it's in your packet. I have a whole list of the trainings that we've covered, signs and symptoms, screening, home, at school, what to do if a student in your class is exhibiting symptoms, which is kind of the process we've been talking about in the flow chart that we have available, how to do cleaning and disinfecting, how to don and doff, new words I've learned, your face covering appropriately. There's a whole list of them there in your packet. In addition, I know this week the custodians, there's training scheduled with our primary vendor of our disinfectant with them. And then nurses are also having refreshers this week in anticipation of students returning next week to go over all of these things again.
And bus drivers as well.
Yes, ma'am. This is every employee.
Every
Yep.
staff member.
Yes, ma'am.
So it looks like there was a PowerPoint presentation that was given to the staff during the week of August 10th. It's on the website.
Yes, that would have been,
That's something that would be
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that was the initial training that the nurses did. And it was given as both a PowerPoint for them to look at themselves, but also nurses scheduled like small group in-person trainings with their staffs as well. And that was like the foundational PowerPoint they used. But yes, it should be posted on the website. In fact, everything that's been, much of what's been provided to employees and families is on the website. It's not real easy to get to. We just need to post it from the main page, but it's under my page, my heading right now, all of those resources.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's some way that we could have on our website where it's just COVID specific so that all the information that we've discussed and all of the resources that you have for both staff and families is easily accessible. Because it, you know, I'm not very computer literate, I will admit, and I've had a really difficult time trying to maneuver through it. We could just make that a little bit more user friendly. I think that would help.
Will do.
And so after the plan, the next 2 slides were just the 5 key mitigation strategies and just pointing out some of those key things that we've done. You know, obviously the health mitigation plan is very broad. And then internally and locally, we develop much more specific protocols and procedures. And so the remainder of that 34-page packet has a lot of those actual documents in there, like the form that we use to follow up with our staff members if they were to fail the screening, as well as the flow charts. So John, if you can go to slide 6. And this flow chart is also the one in Dr. Benson's presentation, so you'll find it in a couple of different places. This is responding to staff that may have symptoms. And then the other one is fairly similar, and it's responding to students. This is in text form because we've had it in text form for months now. On page, I think it's page 13 of the 34-page document, along with some scenarios that the board had presented and what our response would be to those scenarios. And then this is just those procedures graphically. So if you guys want to take a few minutes to look those over, I'll be happy to answer those questions as well.
Let's go back to the PPE.
Yes.
So all the staff has received PPE, all staff?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's,
John?
That's all I need to know.
if you could look at slide maybe 3, I think it is. Yes, so at minimum, every staff member in the division has received 5 reusable face coverings. And actually the second bullet should say at minimum of 2 reusable per student. Those are already distributed to the buildings and we have more on stock for, as needed. And obviously we have additional for any lost, forgotten, or soiled. Our bus drivers have gotten them for transportation needs. And those have been given to every school for every staff member and student. And that's not just any K2 student that's choosing to return. They have enough in their buildings right now for all 4,500 students to have 2 each at whatever point they return. As far as PPE, which is like the next tier of protection, those are your shields and goggles and gloves, gowns, etc. Those have been provided to any staff member whose job responsibilities require those, and that's based on what they do on a daily basis. I actually included on this slide the statement from the CDC website about PPE in schools, and it's if you anticipate contact with blood, bodily fluids, secretions, and excretions, except for sweat, non-intact skin or mucous membranes, then additional PPE should be considered. And of course, whether it's a shield or goggles or gowns, et cetera, would be dependent on your actual work with that an individual student, et cetera. But yes, in short, every staff member has received what is required for them to do their job.
And do we have protocol in place as to how the PPE is going to be distributed, monitored, or?
Yes, so the face coverings and those broader things have just been provided to the administrators for distribution. We actually send like a box with a whole roster of their staff members and say, okay, 5 to each of these staff members based on the HR rosters that we receive. And then for the more specific PPE, that is through the special education department as well as our school nurses. They help monitor that because they make the determination as medical professionals what PPE, what those risks are for those staff members in accordance with these guidelines. And so they help monitor the distribution of it to ensure it's going to the right places.
Thank you.
Ms. Fisher, I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the COVID-19 response protocol for students, which is, I guess, the last page of your presentation.
Yes.
I just had a question about so at the bottom below, if a student reports a positive COVID-19 test result, the second box under school nurse, it says coordinates sick leave procedures and tracks return to work timeline with staff member.
That is my lack of sleep and lack of editing. So that probably actually is supposed to be removed completely, would be their return to school. And I appreciate you, because these have not been published out to the website yet. Again, we have it in text version, not in graphical version. So I will be sure to update that and correct that. So that would be coordinate return to school timelines.
With family, yep, okay. Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Anybody have any further questions? Thanks, Ms. Fisher. You did a great job.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Yes,
Fisher.
thank you.
Get some sleep. Sure you need. So you ready for questions?
Yeah. Dr. Benson, did you want to
Yeah, I'll quickly
go
just
through anything
talk
else?
to you. Again, want to thank Ms. Fisher for preparing that information and sharing it with you. I have next just the updated, and you know that each meeting, and then I believe in the week that we did not have a meeting, I still updated this slide for you. This is the rainbow colored health metrics to kind of keep you. And just for our public, this is available on our website in the school board packets. It's got a reference link that you can go to get the very same information, and it is updated daily. So it's It's a useful tool in that respect. I will certainly admit to you right now, the calculation of the statistic itself, I would need help with from VDH, but I do think that the way they display these in terms of the color coding does help. I have tried, and I hope it's helpful. If it's not, then let me know. I have tried to then, in your chart, I believe you have give you the current metric where it stands and where it falls in terms of the continuum, but also in parentheses give you then last week's, a 1 week's time where it stood, that same metric stood on your handout. And I hope that did not confuse, but the number in parentheses is simply there to try to represent the change, the direction of change from a week ago. And in this case, it would be the 19th of October. So with that said, and I hope I'm looking at my packet, I hope I have copied the, at the top of yours, if you're looking at hard copy, does it have the 19th and the 26th, or the 19th?
Yes.
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 Okay, good.
Yes. As of 10/26, changed since 10/19.
Very good. Okay, so you can see there, it's fairly self-explanatory. You can see where not only King George currently rests in terms of these metrics that we've looked at for several weeks, but also early on in the process, it was mentioned that we thought it important to look at our health district, all of the counties and city and Fredericksburg City in our health district, given half of our employees reside outside of King George County. So I won't read the numbers to you. You see them there. You see where we fall. We still, in terms of positivity, I believe, we're still in that moderate risk category. The other two indicators were higher in terms of risk of transmission. But I do want to mention, and I think I mentioned at the last meeting because I did speak with our lead at VDH for King George County, and she cautioned me or wanted me to pass along to you all, because we are relatively small in population, these metrics that are per 100,000, for every one of ours, you really need to, that's 4, because we have approximately 25,000 residents in King George. So their statistic is calculated at a rate of per 100,000. So you can see then you get 4 for every one of ours. It counts as 4 on their scale. So keep that in mind when you're inferring from these statistics. But I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have. And again, I hope the parenthetical information helps to try to give you an idea in terms of trend or more recent trends. So while we may still be, let's see, there was one, I think it was in positivity, where we're still maybe in the moderate risk, but the positivity is actually decreased. Is that right? I've got the wrong one in front of me, but you've got the right one.
Yes.
Was there a slight, from what I remember, there's a slight decrease in positivity for the current week. However, it stays in that same yellow spot in the continuum. So I just thought, rather than just that's where we lie, at least you could have a little bit more clarity in terms of any movement over the past week by including that information. I'll continue to update that for you if you find that helpful.
So just to be clear, in case people, can you hear me? In case people can't see the screen or haven't looked at the website, this chart is was just introduced by the CDC a few weeks ago to be specifically a school metrics dashboard. So core indicator number 1, number of new cases per 100,000 persons in the last 14 days, King George is in the higher risk. The dark orange being the highest risk, and we are in the higher risk of transmission in schools currently today.
Correct. Along with everyone else, it seems, in that, as far as that statistic.
Right.
That's all. Thank you.
John, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so next, the board asked, what would it look like? You approved a concept in terms of K2 coming back to school. Subsequent to that meeting, we did go back and we reached out, and I appreciate not only our families who responded in timely fashion, but also our teachers in particular and school level administrators who helped track down, so to speak, our missing families to make sure we had a comprehensive accounting for all the students in those grade levels, what their preference was in terms of mode of instructional delivery. Do you prefer 100% remote, or would you want to engage in in-person learning? And we did put some description in there to give them an idea of what it would look like, so to speak. Once those numbers came back, then we were able to look at staffing and the potential per student, per classroom numbers. And so we've developed these tables for you so that you can see. I'll just simply go through them. At King George Elementary School, as the example, you'll see in the first column the grade level, obviously. The second column, we've simply labeled teacher A, B, C, D, E, depending on the number of teachers that they currently have at that corresponding grade level. The format, obviously, virtual standing for V standing for virtual, IP for in-person. And then the number of students that would be assigned to that teacher, given their choice of instructional modality. So at King George Elementary School, for example, we have 2 sections. The way the numbers came back to us, King George Elementary School would dedicate 2 teachers at the kindergarten level to teach approximately 21 subjects per section virtually. The remaining 3 teachers would each have an in-person section, so to speak, of kindergarten. Their class sizes would be 15, 14, and 15, respectively. So that's to give you that as an example. You can obviously then look through these tables and see how these class sizes fell out. I will add one other thing. At each school at one grade level, the numbers became high. Quite frankly, they were 18. I think in one case we had 20, even across a couple of sections. I think at Sealston in kindergarten, we had 20 students per section, and that's simply based on the number of students that responded or families that responded. They prefer the in-person instruction. So what we are currently doing is we are trying to reach out to see if we can engage licensed teachers who could help us to reduce those class size numbers that we could hire. These will be, again, licensed teachers, maybe recently retired from us, folks that we know that have performed services for us or are aligned to do services for us in the capacity of a long-term sub. But I think, at the point where we started to reach 18 and 20, it was simply just too much. We've made it clear that social distancing, to the extent possible, will certainly be what we try to do. But our staffing only goes so far in dividing these students out. And again, we are trying to maintain the same level of instructional delivery we've engaged in since we began the school year. And that's the 4 days, the 4 half days of direct teacher interaction. So to preserve that, this is how the numbers fall out when we divide it out or assign it across the staff we have available. And I want to highlight that the orange, I don't know if it's showing up on your hard copies, but the orange shading is a teacher position that has yet to be contracted. And we're working hard to contract those. I don't mean to put Lucy Zierski on the spot, but she's probably on her phone right now texting potential candidates because we're working feverishly to make sure that if this is the option we go with, that we reduce those numbers as best we can per class. So I've done a lot of talking about these tables. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have up to this point. I'll kind of pause there.
Can you, sorry, may I?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Cox.
Can you talk with us a little bit about the concern about the large numbers in a virtual classroom? I just, 30 students in a virtual classroom, is that whole screen filled? To put it mildly, I just have great trepidation about our finest teachers being able to cope with 30 faces on a screen.
Yep. I don't know how to.
Do we have any mitigation for that?
I spoke with 2 principals in particular and said, well, the numbers on the virtual side, and forgive me, I didn't mean to only address the in-person. I know that that's where we're working very hard to try to get those numbers down for the distancing aspect. The virtual, you're correct, Ms. Hawk. Those numbers are high as well. simply because of the way we need to divide out our staffing. But I do know from a practical matter that I think that teachers would adjust. I think it's impractical to think they would have 30 at a time on a screen. They would probably schedule in a more flexible fashion, utilize more hours of the day to try to meet with students at different times so they could afford more individual attention to students, particularly at the very youngest. So while I'm on that, because I anticipate the next question, does that necessitate a teacher change? Yes, in many cases. We tried to preserve teachers. We've looked at a strategy to try to have students return in the afternoon to the teacher with whom they began the year. And we'll certainly continue to try to maintain that relationship that teacher has developed with the student thus far. It's just a complicated equation to try to make staffing work with students and keep sizes low as best we can. And so there's no doubt that in some cases we will have a need to reassign students to teachers. But again, we're committed to providing a licensed teacher to every student.
Is there any option either through funding or maybe some subs who or retired folks who would not be willing to come into the classroom for their own age or health or whatever, would be willing to do virtual? And could we lower those numbers by adding any virtual classroom?
There's always that option. I think the reality is that we're finding out over the last day or two is that there really aren't that many folks that are quite frankly, well, I don't want to characterize. That's not fair. It's a tough sell. I think that's a fair way to put it. So we're hopeful we can find the 3 we need just to reduce the in-person. If we can find others, great. We could use that in terms of the financing or the revenue stream we talked about earlier. We could possibly utilize funds, no matter which pot they come from, to try to help offset that. But I think the reality is we have a shortage of teacher candidates. We have an even bigger shortage of those who are licensed who are willing to come back out of retirement or who are just out there looking for employment right now.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Tolliver.
I have a couple of comments. So we get a lot of emails, as everybody's already stated. Over and over again, I hear how hard teachers are already working to accommodate the virtual. And so now you made a comment about if they have to have 29 or 30 kids in their classroom, they're going to have to adjust. I think that's asking a lot to adjust again, to having adjusted already, to working longer hours than, this is what I hear frequently, than they normally would because of the whole situation the way it is now. One comment. 2, how many current empty positions do we have K-2 at all 3 elementary schools? Currently empty, not trying to fill new ones.
Currently empty teacher positions?
Yes.
Currently not filled elementary.
Any vacant?
Yes, currently not filled.
Do have one. It's a upper grade at
Beyond grade 2, but none in grade 2.
none.
So what if we can't get teachers to fill these positions, licensed teachers? To fill not only currently empty ones, and my understanding there's more than one, but Ms. Yuzerski knows better than I do. But you're looking at hiring 3. What if we can't get those people?
Yeah, then we're either left with using a long-term sub, or we need to those students would need to be pushed back into and divided across the existing teachers that we do have.
So Sealson already has in kindergarten 1, 2, 3, all 4, 3 currently, and 4 if you can get another teacher, 17 kids in a classroom. So if you can't get another, fill that position, then you're dividing 17 kids among 3 other teachers, putting that number up to, what's 17 divided by 3? 21, 22 kids in a classroom. Okay, so my next question is, can I keep going? Somebody else, Ms. Gonzalez, you want to?
I have questions, but you can go ahead.
Just have really one more right now.
Mhm.
How much space is there between these desks that teachers can walk through? They have to get around the room, correct? Especially when you have 17 and possibly 18.
Yep.
So so the desks are 3 feet apart, and that's assuming a student is going to stay within that 3-foot range. But how much space between desks for teachers to maneuver and paras to get through? Has
I
that
believe,
been-
as you stated, I believe they set them up at 3 feet apart for the purpose of the picture.
So at Sealston, they may be 3 feet apart this way. Are they 3 feet apart all sides?
Looks at least 3 feet, front to back. You mean from front to back?
And side to side, where people have to walk through?
I'm guessing yes, Ms. Tolliver, but I think your point's well taken. And certainly we've said, even where, no matter where the desks are located, the reality is these are young children. Learning is not a stationary activity. I don't think anybody would expect that they sit at that desk for an hour and a half every day. You know, there are certainly going to be times, and that's why I've been very transparent in saying that we will do the very best we can to distance whenever possible. The reality is that learning is active at times, and learning with young children just can't guarantee that they're going to remain at minimum 3 feet apart from each other the entire time. That's just not. I don't think anybody would think that would be the case, just from a common sense standpoint. But you had asked just for a picture. I think Ms. Pincero asked just for a picture of what a classroom would look like. And aside from the plexiglass on each desk that you have an example of there on the dais, that's what they tried to do. So just set it up to show you how many desks would fit per classroom. And I think the assumption that each school is a correct one. Each school is different. The facilities are different. The physical class square footage may vary from school to school. And so that just gives you a sample of what a classroom might look like at each school.
Madam Chair, may I ask some questions?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Gonzalez.
All right, thank you. So Dr. Benston, so a couple questions I have. So one, based on the VDH process flow that we saw earlier that says symptomatic students will be quarantined, will be required to stay home for say 10 to 14 days. How are those students attending virtually? Are they going to be added to the existing virtual classes? So an in-person student, say at King George on the first page here, say a kindergartner has teacher C for in-person, so they're one of 15 students, and they come down, they're symptomatic or they've had close contact, and they are required to isolate at home with their family for say 10 to 14 days. But I assume based on previous conversation that virtual instruction would be an option to them. How are they receiving that virtual education? Are they being added to kindergartner teachers A or B's class?
Not necessarily. No,
So,
it would really be just much like when a student's absent for extended period of time as it is, that teacher that's assigned to that student then would have to forward work assignments, that kind of thing. Now, with that said, that's an assumption. I'm sure that at any school, let's say that we had a student who was struggling and then unfortunately needed to be out for 10 days. In that case, it may be knowing our staff, they may talk to each other in that kindergarten team and say, hey, I need somebody to help with this student in particular. So I don't want to give you a one-size-fits-all answer because I think you should know enough about the culture of our schools that our teacher teams, particularly at the elementary level, the kids in kindergarten are our students in kindergarten. They may be divided across 5 different teachers, but all 110 are our students. And so I'm sure there will be collaboration in that school as to how to best accommodate students. And certainly their thinking and their tactical approach to that type of situation, I'd value greatly. And I'm sure principals would support them figuring out a plan for when that would have to happen, how they would best support the student.
So does that mean we have not thought about how we're going to handle that?
No, I don't think it means that at all. It just means that I would give the school level the latitude to approach different cases differently. Instead of prescribing, if a student is out, then they're added to the next virtual section period kind of thing. We wouldn't take that approach.
Okay. I guess it seems to me unfortunate that we've gone to these lengths to establish virtual options for students but yet be faced with students being quarantined, which we think will probably be quite likely, but they would not be able to take advantage of the virtual instruction that we have set up. I understand the complications with numbers of students in classes. It just seems to me like that's something that we could have, that could be, that more, I don't know, more thought could be given to on all. I understand in the current construct, maybe there are additional challenges.
Well, in your example, you just had the one student. You know, let's say we had other students. Let's say we have a positive case, and we have a situation where we do need to isolate or quarantine multiple students.
Right.
You know, it could be very well be that the prudent decision is to then revert for that period of time that classroom in its entirety back to the virtual approach. The good news is that, you know, we've already had several weeks of that, so we're accustomed to that. We have the agility to pivot to that fairly quickly without too much disruption. So again, I was just trying to answer it in the context of the one, if you had the one in your example, but it could be a very different adjustment if we had 10, you know, or 11 students that were needing to stay home for an extended period of time.
Understood.
And that one student always has the option of going to the doctor and being diagnosed with something that's not COVID, and they can return within a day or two as well. So it's not like every student that comes up with a symptom is going to have to be quarantined for 10 days. So there's a good possibility we're not going to have a whole lot of kids out at a time, correct?
Well, I guess in concept, if the student doesn't have the availability of getting a diagnosis in terms of healthcare, or, you know, then they would be out. I simply was just, I think Ms. Gonzalez was a student who's symptomatic who doesn't have a diagnosis, who would need to stay home 10 days, is what I was just trying to address.
Yes, and so I guess my mother, you know, there seemed to be a lot of uncertainty. So we're T minus what, 7-8 days here from go time for kindergarten through 2 going back, and it seems there's still a lot of uncertainty. So we're still talking about trying to get teachers on contract before now. And I do want to say I think we have come a very, very long ways in the last month since the board voted to send K through 2 back. So I'm very encouraged by the progress that we've made. But at this point in the game, I know we've lost a couple of weeks since the board, we did not have meetings for the last 2-3 weeks here. But you know, at this point in the game, I know Dr. Benson, you know, like time is, you know, certainly not a knock on you. I know you have a lot of hard work, but I know we're kind of at the point where there are still a lot of assumptions. I would feel more comfortable at this point in time if we had many fewer assumptions and there were less uncertainties. So still getting teachers on contacts. We talk about trying to maintain teacher consistency across the classes with, you know, some students being, you know, moved around. And then we talk about the shortage of teacher candidates. I guess as far as class assignments goes, with these, the possibility even for the 3 new teachers across the schools, have the class assignments been identified that indicate which kids will need to switch teachers, like virtual students? Which, like, do we know how many kids are going to be getting new teachers?
I don't know. Principals would do those class assignments.
So with a week to go, when is that going to be done?
Well, in time to begin. And I think that's part of the reason I would request an October or a November 5th start date instead of November 2nd, to not only give us time for the physical setup of the classroom, but to officially roll rosters into our student information system to get set up for the next quarter of the school year. So I'm sure, knowing our elementary principals, I'm sure they've done some they've obviously helped me with the numbers, just so that we would have the information by teacher letter, so to speak, tonight. I'm sure that they've got preliminary or contingency plans in place in terms of rosters or potential groupings should this proceed.
Any other questions?
I do.
Okay. Ms. Tolliver, do you have any more questions?
Well, I do have one, just kind of piggyback on what Ms. Gonzalez said. What if a teacher is exposed or test positive and has to quarantine for 14 days? Where are you going to put those now possibly 20 kids that they've got in their classroom?
Well, I'm presuming if a teacher then is positive, then the students in that classroom are certainly going to meet that new definition the CDC has put out in terms of, you know, 15 cumulative minutes within 6 feet. So that's one of those cases where I would say it'd be very likely the whole class then would be engaged in virtual for at least the quarantine period.
So what if it's just a 10-day isolation that the teacher is out? I mean, there could be a situation where a teacher is out and it looks like it's difficult to even get people to fill these gaps, which again is putting these classrooms to start next week up to 22 and 23 potentially at Silston. A teacher's out for 10 days and those kids don't need to be out for 10 days. What happens to them?
I'm not sure I'm tracking with if the
Well,
teacher,
say somebody gets exposed on a weekend and they weren't around those kids in their classroom for whatever
okay.
specified amount of time it is. So the teacher, calls and says, I've been exposed to COVID over the weekend. I can't be in for 10 days or until I can get to the doctor. What do you do with those potentially 20 students when you already have all your other classes with potentially 20 students?
I would, just as we do in the normal school year, if a teacher needs to be out for an extended period of time, we'd have to go to our substitute list and look for a long-term sub, not a relatively long-term sub in that case.
But you've already implied that they're hard to get right now.
They are. I don't have a magic or a silver dust that I can sprinkle on it to make it any better. I mean, it is, you see very clearly the challenges associated with it. We're trying to accommodate both platforms in terms of the modality of instruction. And when we do that, we divide the numbers out, the staffing only goes so far. When we saw how far the staffing went in the case of at least those 3 grade levels, we quickly saw the need to then find additional instructional staff or a way to reduce those in-person numbers to the extent we could.
So can you keep desks 3 feet apart when you have 23 kids in a classroom? Just,
I don't believe so.
you don't believe so?
In many of our classrooms, I don't believe so.
I don't believe so either. Can we talk about the desk shields for a minute? Is that a good time for this? Is it sitting here?
Sure.
Ms. Fisher? I don't know. Somebody want?
Oh, I think it was just here to show as an example to you. I know a couple board members had questions offline about the availability of the plexiglass on the desks. I believe Wednesday is the delivery day that we've ordered enough of these for the K2 at least to have those placed on individual student desks that you see pictured. And so the worry was that those would not be available, that the stockpile nationally, that we just couldn't procure them in time. So the good news is we are going to be able to have those here in time for desks. That's what they look like because we figured they weren't pictured in the picture examples and you all would want to see what one of those looks like.
So just again, so a teacher is handing out papers, which I guess they have to give out something sometime, don't they? So how did they get around that without getting close to a child? Jump it over the top? Yeah.
So, well, I mean, I think they're going to have a little bit of, they're going to be within the 3 feet of the child handing out a piece of paper.
Well,
Or
they're gonna
if
get
they're
rid-
pointing at, if they're going to be pointing at something, but,
And this
I
is
don't
with
know.
the stipulation that every child is wearing a mask
Correct.
for the entire time.
Unless directed by the teacher, like a structured or a scheduled break, so to speak, where they can ensure that the children are socially distant.
I have been trying to do as much research as I can about those. In fact, I've got one of the cards that just came today. And I have read mixed opinions about whether a child could remove their mask behind the screen if they're 3 feet apart. And do we have an opinion about that? I mean, have you done more research than I have?
I don't think we have a formal opinion. I think that we're requiring masks to be worn in the classroom by students and staff unless directed otherwise by the staff member. I think if we got into that level, we've already determined that, we'll distance to the extent possible, but most of the time, certainly 6 feet is not possible.
No,
We see that clearly in the pictures. Oftentimes 3 feet won't be possible. Brought up some what if scenarios. I'm sure we could list 100 more what if scenarios where 3 feet is not going to be maintained. And given the CDC's new definition in terms of cumulative minutes, not just minutes in proximity, consecutive, I think if we were to, God forbid, have a case then the people in that room that shared that space for an hour and a half are no doubt all going to be defined as close contacts. That's simply how this translates, you know, and I just can't make that any better than it is. That's the reality of it.
So I have, Madam Chair, do you have a question?
Go ahead.
So I guess I had two related questions. So on the topic of mask use, so I understand we're talking about, you know, what, like 5 through 7 year olds. So there's some inherent challenges with getting them to do anything you want them to do, in my experience. But so as far as mask wearing is concerned, how, I guess, how are teachers, or what is the recommended strategy for dealing with students who perhaps don't want to wear masks? You know, medical exemptions aside, like how are we handling students that are going to be difficult and not want to wear masks?
I think as we do with any behavior that would be a challenge to the good order, the structure of the classroom, teachers would reach out to families to seek their support as a first level, and if need be, it could be elevated to the administrative level to try to as a matter of recourse and correct.
Okay. And then my second question is with respect to the physical distancing. So I know a big part of our, you know, the logistics for the planning is the bus situation, and that the number of buses that we can realistically use are based on the number of students that can be seated on them in order to meet the physical distancing requirements. I understand the numbers in the classrooms are based on the number of students that want to return and the number of teachers that we have. But I guess, you know, philosophically, it seems hypocritical, perhaps, that we are enforcing physical distancing on buses, but not in classrooms. I mean, if one were to assume that 3 feet or less, when we say we can't really guarantee that we're going to be able to maintain that in classrooms, then what's the point of doing it on buses?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if we're being hypocritical necessarily, but I do, because in both instances, we're going to physically distance kids to the extent possible. You know, that's the consistency. You see quickly with the mathematics of numbers and layout of the desks, oftentimes it won't be possible to maintain even the 3 feet in the classroom. The buses, it's a little more static situation that there is no, you know, with the bus moving, the students aren't going to be moving around the bus as they may be in a classroom. That said, you know, we will seat them diagonally, 1 per seat. With the age group of child that we're looking at, the height of the seat back in front of it actually does serve as somewhat of a shield to that next seat in front of the next child, obviously. But I think the bus, is a little different situation in terms of the predictability of movement on that bus and the way we can see kids. But certainly, and I said this last meeting, moving forward, you know, depending on how things translate, it does severely limit the amount of transportation that we have for students. So that could be a decision down the road in terms of, you know, just as we in the classroom will do the best we can, should we so too on a bus, and say to the extent we can seat them this way, we will. However, if we have more students who need the transportation than can sit in this fashion, we have to make a decision then whether we're going to allow that or not.
Right. So I understand we're at this point with the sizes in the classroom because we switched from our hybrid plan to the K through 2 option to bring more students back. I guess. So I feel like we approach this because we can't do any better because this is the path that we've gone down, but we could do better if we had a different approach, which I know we're a week out from this one. But, you know, I know we voted on this a month ago in a somewhat haphazardly fashion. So I feel like we're stuck with these numbers right now because we're insisting upon doing the half days when there are other options that were originally discussed that would reduce our numbers. And I know we are where we are, and I don't mean to rehash the past, but I don't feel like this is our only option. I don't have the recommended solution, but the numbers could be cut in half based on things that we've discussed in the past, right?
They certainly, mathematically, that's easy enough to cut them in half. We can slice the numbers up, you know, in multiple ways. In fact, we have that task group now beginning to explore different schedule options that would allow a greater number of students to to access in-person instruction. The question is, at what cost? You know, if we were to go back to the hybrid that you've referenced, you know, that hybrid had a blue group and a gold group that would access direct instruction from a teacher 2 days a week, and they would engage in asynchronous activity online without that teacher 3 days a week. You know, so that you're certainly correct. These numbers could be better in terms of reducing them. The question then becomes, is the quality of what we're offering instructionally better, or does it at least meet the needs of students in order to accommodate the want for in-person or virtual? Keep in mind, we're accommodating both modalities. We're not making a decision that everybody is going to go be part of a blue group or a gold group. We didn't start that way. We're accommodating all preferences at this point, and that certainly has a lot to do with why the numbers are where they are. We could switch to a blue gold. We can look at that. That'll probably be one of the you know, either that idea or a close cousin or iteration of that idea will probably be coming to this board as you all have requested. What are some options maybe for larger numbers of students? And that'll become very clear, as it was after the first survey. You know, I heard that loud and clear in all the commentary, both families and staff, that Wednesdays are not necessarily folks' favorite day, particularly at home, because of the need for greater engagement. You have less direct teacher interaction on that day. The blue gold option essentially created 3 of those Wednesday type days, those asynchronous days. But you're correct that it would drop these numbers roughly in half in terms of the in-person.
Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about the benefit to students, right? So the benefit of this, I guess I'm interested in what is the benefit, or, you know, so we selected this based on the benefit to the students versus the blue and gold option earlier. But so from a benefit, I guess I'm interested in thoughts on what the difficulties or what perhaps we're losing. So we've heard a lot from teachers in response to this, that there is the, you know, requisite amount of time at the beginning of a semester, or especially at the beginning of the school year, when children are readjusting to being back in the classroom and learning their teacher and learning their new routines. And that, you know, that's something that's been quite apparent to us parents at home, you know, that the period of time that it takes students to get up to speed and get accustomed to their teacher and the routine and all that sort of stuff. So now on November 5th, you know, we're talking about trying to, we're gonna reinstitute that now and introduce this disruption in learning, right, you know, just with a couple of weeks before the Thanksgiving holiday, and then we're gonna come back and then it's gonna be the Christmas holiday. And so is the benefit, I guess I'm not sold on the benefit to having children back in the classroom with some amount of safety risk outweighs the loss of instruction time, in addition to the loss of instruction time from a disruption to schedules, with kids getting used to riding the bus and being back in person, with dust shields and masks and all that goes along with it, as well as virtual students who are going to be switching teachers, in addition to the fact that the K through 2 students are going to be not getting specials live anymore, and that's going to be provided asynchronously. I feel like we're making a lot of concessions to get children back in the classroom, specifically for to what end? To get kids back in the classroom?
Well, I think it's because a lot of kids aren't comfortable doing virtual learning. But Mr. Collins, did you have some questions?
So we jumped into the transportation. There's how many buses, Dr. Benson? 32. And the in-person for K2 will cover 241, which is 13 to 19 buses. So while we're discussing transportation and back to school, I asked Dr. Benson for some numbers. At the high school, there's 118 students that are failing 2 or more courses. At the middle school, there's 129 students failing 3 or more courses. At the high school, there's 50 to 60 students that haven't even showed up for school, and it's 46 at the middle school. So if you, that's about to say that's 217 students. You could run some more buses and get those kids that are really, really hurting back in the school. So we've already voted twice on the K2. I don't,
Wait a minute, are you introducing a new
I'm,
plan?
I'm adding, no, I'm adding on to the K2.
Okay,
We already voted on K2.
Voted twice.
yes, yes.
I'm saying that we talk, this board talks about equity all the time, over and over and over and over again. And then when it comes time to do that, we have an opportunity to do that because we are falling short on these students that are failing miserably in school.
Well, we've got a similar situation, and I don't mean to impinge on your time. But we've got, yes, we have high school students in need. We have middle school students in need. We've got elementary students, 3, 6 who are in need.
Right. But what I'm telling you is that we're going to have to cross this bridge somewhere along the line. And as I've mentioned, can't keep kicking the can down the road. And then I also introduced some things earlier about the, safety for the teachers and staff. So I think that we need to move forward and not move backwards.
I agree.
We have a plan for K2. We know there's going to be challenges. We're going to meet those challenges. And if the challenges aren't met correctly, then we'll change it.
Yeah, since this is new waters, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of adjustments as we go along. And we can sit here and play the what if game all night long and not get any answers to that. But, I mean, there's a lot of schools that it's working. They've gone back from day one, 100%, or with the options of virtual, hybrid. It's done in multiple states across the country and it's working. So I'm personally feel that pretty confident that, we are a small community and I think we're going to be able to work together and make it work. Are there going to be adjustments? Yes. But I agree with Mr. Collins. I think we need to move on and figure out, okay, we've got this K2 plan in place. So what's the next step?
Can I say something? I
Yes,
think
Ms.
we made a
Collins.
plan with probably hastily on my part voting for, I agree, but I didn't think we had any other plan at the time. But is it okay to have a plan and move forward with a plan that's not a good one? Some of these numbers are no different than if everybody were in the building. 23 kids potentially in elementary school classes cannot socially distance. They cannot be safe. So I don't want to go backwards either, but I think waiting till the end of the semester and like we're doing with everyone else, keep them virtual and get some of the answers to these questions and try to get some teachers contracted and hired, try to figure out the answers to some of these things we don't have answers to. It's only a few weeks of school left until the end of the semester. I don't know at this point, we've waited this long. Now we're going to push it back another week. What's another 3 weeks or 4 weeks just to be able to ensure, again, it's a safety issue. 23 kids in a classroom potentially is no way to social distance, period, and one. And that's for students. Staff, again, have voiced their concerns over and over and over again about their concerns about their safety and the safety of their families. Thank you.
And I've heard those concerns and I brought forth ways to mitigate those concerns.
Not for this numbers, you can't mitigate them. You can't do it.
Well, we are mitigating them with the
You have
AAP.
shields, you have masks,
PPE.
you have PPE.
Right.
What else can you do, really?
For
So-
5-year-olds?
So
I mean,
what?
we have 3 feet. Is that not correct, Ms. Fisher? The desks, all the desks, well, the children will be at least 3 feet apart. I mean, if the desks are 3 feet apart and the desks are 3 feet long, that the students are sitting 6 feet apart. They're not 3 foot long. I don't know how big a desk is, but they're 5 foot apart. So this,
No, they'd be 3 feet apart. However, keep in mind in those pictures, I believe most of those pictures have 15 desks in those pictures. So, Ms. Tolliver's point is that you do, in some cases, you might have 20 students in a class if we're unsuccessful in procuring an additional teacher. So that's 5 more desks that would need to go. And I don't think that's, or Sealston necessarily that picture, but in the Sealston classroom, then you would have to put 5 more desks in that picture. The pictures were taken prior to knowing the outcome of the survey. But that's just not a safe assumption to assume that those that spacing would be maintained if you added 5 more desks potentially.
So, but we haven't even discussed about the CDC guidelines that, there's children are at low risk for
That's not true.
it's, this, I mean, it's right here under the CDC guidelines off of their website. It says based on current data, the rate of infection among younger school children and from students to teachers has been low, especially if proper precautions are followed. There have also been few reports of children being the primary source of COVID-19 transmission among family members.
So, Madam Chairman, we're rehashing the stuff we've hashed through
I agree.
for some time. We've made a plan. We need to move on with that plan and add some things to it, as I keep going over and over again about the HIPAA and the cleaning and the testing. So
Which I think have been answered.
No, we have not discussed those.
we have not discussed those. I just put them out there.
Well,
So when we voted twice, we voted that we'll have in-person and virtual. So there's people that want to go in person and there's people that want to go virtual, and the meeting those needs. The third to that situation was our staff members. As I said earlier, we get tons and tons of emails and talking to us everywhere, Farmers Market and everything, about what their concerns are. So we don't need to go back to the K2. We need to move forward with the kids that are they're having troubles, and we need to mitigate the staff members' concerns.
So Madam Chair, may I say something?
sure.
Okay. So in response to both Ms. Panzeri, your comments from the CDC guidelines as well as Mr. Collins. So a bit like, I mean, all of that is true. A big part of the equation that I think we fail to give proper credit to is that all of these things that, students can be back in school cells if we're taking proper precautions, and there, and there are a lot of factors. And so we're hearing that our plan right now does not adhere to the physical. Like we cannot, we've heard from Dr. Benson that we cannot guarantee that our students will be able to maintain physical distancing, that's a part of having a plan that is incorporating proper precautions. And we have said we cannot guarantee, and we're not even pretending to guarantee that we can meet that. Mr. Collins, you have made a ton of really good points earlier about, HEPA filters and all these sorts of things. There have been concerns from teachers in some schools about the quality of the air handling in the buildings. And so all of those sorts of things are things that could be addressed, whether we get there, there have been really good suggestions about portable air filters. Mr. Collins, you mentioned HEPA filters. There are all these sorts of things that are all great ideas. And all of those we can give proper credence to them. And I don't know what the budget, if they can be afforded in the budget, but all of that is the kind of planning that needs to be done. And we were making great strides, prior, but when we said we made a plan, we didn't make a plan. We voted on an option that was not yet a plan. That option became a plan the week later after the vote. And while, yes, we voted on it twice, I disagree that we voted on a plan. We voted on an option. And I think that was premature. And I think it is not unreasonable. It's not moving backwards. It is accepting that perhaps we made a decision that was not made with all information included at that time. And I think it shows that we're doing our due diligence and we're not sticking with the plan purely because we stuck with the plan. I agree, kicking the can down the road is a terrible idea. Much to a comment that was made a few weeks ago. I think it was on the meeting where we voted about having a roadmap for getting there. I know I probably sound like I'm beating a dead horse. I keep saying these things, and I know Ms. Panzeri, you're nodding, but that's fine. We've talked about doing this and having weekly meetings. I think, and we haven't done that. We've lost 3 weeks of time. And I think so much could be done between now and the beginning of next semester to meet all of these things. We can talk about air quality and get quotes for getting new filters or whatever, and a lot of these things can be met, and we can evaluate other plans, such as Dr. Benson, I'm sure the advisory committee is doing now, looking at the plan for how we do get everyone back in the buildings, because that is everyone's ultimate goal. But I don't think we're ready. For one thing, the conversation about having weekly meetings, I think we need to do that from now until Christmas. I don't know if it's appropriate to make a motion, so we all adhere to that regardless of.
We already had a
We already
motion
did
for
that
that
last
in
time.
the past.
Yeah, so just,
You
know,
made a
there's some
motion to
emergencies
have
that
weekly
came up when we
meetings?
weren't able
We
to
had a
meet.
motion
Yes.
to meet every Monday for the indefinite future, and it was a
Well,
consensus of the board. Everybody voted yes.
Well, then
It's done.
clearly we haven't lived up to our own
Yes,
motions because we
that's a
haven't,
fact. I'm available Mondays.
we haven't met for the last 3 weeks.
Excuse me?
Okay, so can we move on, please?
I have been available Mondays.
No, she didn't say
I wanna
that.
make sure
She didn't
that's
say
clear.
that. That's not what, she didn't say that you were not available. She says we were not available.
I would
don't
like
believe.
to move
So
on to
let's,
Mr.
we just move to move on.
Collins'
Yeah.
discussion about the CARES money, because I think that is part of the impact of how and when to implement the plan that's on the table. And I think we can make changes to the plan. We have a plan, but there's nothing in stone at this point in time that says this date, despite Mrs. Fisher's good efforts, of putting that date in, if we need to mitigate that date, if we need to change that date, we can do that. At what loss, I don't know, but I do think we need to discuss Mr. Collins' advisements about the additional support services before we can implement the plan. So if we could have the discussion tonight, then if we need, we can find out if we need to get more information about them, I guess is where I'm coming from.
Okay. So Mr. Collins, did you?
You want me to make a motion?
Do we want to bring up the, yes.
Can you talk about?
Make a motion for Dr. Benson to explore the instant testing, not to exceed, can I put a number in?
Just, you don't have to put a number, just ask.
Cleaning, contract cleaning and filtration systems.
You don't need a motion for that.
Yeah, so I think we just, I don't know
Just
that we need a
consensus
motion. We
that-
just need a consensus that we ask Dr. Benson to look into that and so that it's available, made available for our next work session on Monday.
So I made a motion. There's no second.
I think what we're saying is we don't need to have a motion in order to do that. I think we're all in consensus that we want that. So we're going to move forward and have Dr.
Sure.
Benson give us
I
information.
will second his motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Gail.
All in favor?
Wasn't that tough?
Okay, all right.
It wasn't that tough.
No, it's not.
So Ms. Hawk, based on your comment a minute ago, are you suggesting that pushing the date back from November 5th could be an option?
I don't see why not. I worry, I have a great many worries, but I worry about exactly what Ms. Gonzalez is discussing, in that are we, what's to be gained at this point? And I have very, very mixed feelings. Our mission is clearly spelled out, and it is the education of our students. But Ms. Tolliver, you and I are on the same wavelength in terms of the fact that social context and socialization and the need for other children and other adults in their lives is essentially part of education. I have great, great fears about young children, especially being out of their social context. Their social context is school. Teachers are feeling out of their social context. It's a terrible time, but how do we mitigate the need for the social context in our youngest children in a safe manner?
So we have a 34-page document here that Ms. Fisher put together that I
Yes.
think is exceptional, that answers all of those questions, if not a majority of them. Let's not say all, I guess. I think the only issue that is really out there is that we have 3 teachers that we have to come up with in the next week.
That's not the only issue, Ms. Pansiera. We have to provide the teachers. We have to provide distancing because
I
going
think we
back
have the
to
distancing.
I think we've all mentioned several times the fact that we cannot provide even the minimum social distancing with mask and with the screens. I want so much for our students to come back, but we cannot bring them back until we are ready for them.
So
I'm
in
not
the,
understanding.
in the,
So
I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yeah.
So you can't keep the distance, but doesn't that mitigate, the shield mitigate the distance? And doesn't the mask mitigate the distance? So like in a hospital, they mitigate by using PPE and for positive cases and shields. So we're mitigating when it's not a case. Wouldn't the distance be smaller then? So if you're,
It's my reading that it is so, that you're right, that you're correct. How much of a mitigation is that? I think that's what everybody is asking, and nobody knows. CDC's guidelines, and I have read them, have changed, but they vary with the different parts of the country even. I just think that with the additional benefits of fully exploring this plan, of putting it into a full operation, we're giving it a better shot if all the pieces are in place than starting at this point.
So then how are we going to do that? I mean, if you're not going to accept the mitigation of having the masks and having the shields and having us 3 feet apart, I mean, we have a majority of our classes are able to maintain that. So there's a handful of classes, or not even a few classes, that we're not going to be able to, correct me if I'm wrong, according to the plan you have now with the additional 3 teachers, how many classes will not be able to maintain the 3-foot distance?
so what I see
So-
is the parents have made a choice and to take their students in person.
Correct.
And then we have given an additional of requiring mask and the mitigation. And again, for not to beat a dead horse, but our challenge is 2 things right now: is staff to make them safe, and we've discussed that, and 2, to get the teachers or long-term subs to mitigate the class size.
So the environment. And
Well, no, that was in all the mitigating of the teachers.
Mr. Collins, you brought up a whole bunch of things earlier, excellent things, the ventilation and PPE, et cetera. And so that's kind of even added more pieces to this puzzle that Ms. Hawk was referring to, that we don't seem to have everything in place. And Ms. Pansera, I have to respectfully disagree. If we have 1 or 2 classes that we can't socially distance and keep safe, that's too many kids right there.
I'm not
So,
saying let's do it because
You
just
said
because
how
of
many
that.
would we
No,
not be
I
able
would like to,
social
I'm not sure.
distance? Okay.
I'm questioning, is that the fact? I mean, I'm hearing that we're not going to be able to do it if we can't get that extra teacher.
3
but
extra teachers.
Well, in each school, the 1 extra teacher in each school. So that's what I'm asking. Are we not able to do it even with that extra teacher? I don't know that we've got that affirmative.
well, I think
Answer.
that is a question.
We don't
You're
have, we
exactly
might not be able
right.
to get
I
them
don't
by
think
next
we've
And the
got
po-
that answer.
Right,
That's
we
what I'm
don't.
asking.
We don't have that answer.
Can I-
And, I think it'll depend on when, Ms. Yuzerski can conjure up these bodies to, given the Halloween theme, to, put additional teachers. How confident are we that we can get that, Ms. Yuzerski? What's our level of confidence?
Can you address Dr. Benson?
Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Benson, would you like to ask Ms. Yuzerski to discuss that?
Absolutely, but I know that she and I have talked extensively today, and I know you're being put on the spot. It's hard to quantify that. I can only qualify it that she's worked very hard today. We had 3 or 4 very hopeful names. I think last we spoke, there was just 1 of those 3 names that actually it was a 4th name that we were looking at. Yeah, sure.
Sub list, okay? When Dr. Benson came to me Thursday afternoon, we have reached out to some of them. Thursday afternoon, when he first asked me that, when he first asked me 3 teachers, I was like, you want just to add 3 teachers? I don't know if we can find 3 teachers. We possibly could find 3 long-term subs from our retired sub list. After having reached out to them, 3 of those are already working for us in long-term capacities. 8 of them were no for various reasons. Some of them have other obligations. Some of them, their physicians advised against it. Some of them we know from the get-go can only commit to 2 or 3 days a week because they have other obligations. And then some of them have students of their own that they're not comfortable leaving at home if they have to come in and sub. We have 1 that can do only virtual, and then there are 4 that we have left messages or we were not able to leave messages, and so we're still waiting to hear back from them.
So we have 1 virtual.
1.
1 virtual.
Now,
And so you have the others that would commit if they got the YMCA childcare.
no, because their children are not in that age bracket. They're in middle school, so they're not eligible for the child care.
So that's the certified teachers.
Those are our retired teachers. We have
Retired.
16 certified teachers on our sub list. Now, we could perhaps put a sub in there that has a college degree, but they're not certified teachers.
Well, we start every year with vacancies in the same fashion. We put in long-term subs.
We do.
Clearly the stakes are a little different and they're not all
Make it good.
No,
entirely available.
never makes it good.
No, I know.
But, you know, you have to meet these challenges, that's all.
But you also have to keep in mind too, that some of our regular staff members will be going out on maternity leave. We have other needs. Going forward, I am, and I think I said this at our last meeting, I am concerned about supervision in the schools if teachers start becoming sick. A lot of our substitutes are older and they're not.
Well, I think, Mr. Rosinski, that that is a concern of yours.
It's a big concern of mine.
It's a concern of yours, but it's up to the board to make those decisions for changes if that occurs.
Correct.
So thank you for that
But
opinion.
that's of our retired licensed teachers. That's what we have right now.
Thank you, Ms. Uzos. My apologies for putting you on the spot, but I've done that before.
And a comment on subs, but first I would say, Mr. Collins, while yes, ultimately it's up to the board, I think it is the board's responsibility to listen to those who it is their job and professional responsibilities to be providing us with information such as the availability of subs. I think to overrule that is irresponsible. So a question I did have about the substitute situation. I was wondering how the substitutes are working out to date with the virtual environment. I do know for a fact that some teachers who have been on, with a doctor's appointment or an unavailability for a day have canceled classes for the day. And I'm wondering have we had other issues such as that? Like, what is the substitute situation now? Because I think it's only going to get worse going forward. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So, I get tired of this. This is teachers and staff are employees and they will have employee needs. And just like any other business, you'll meet those needs. This is kicking the can about what ifs forever.
We got to stop playing the what if game.
We have to.
Mr. Collins just started it this evening.
I didn't start what ifs. I just said, just can't keep in this motion.
Actually, we can until we get to the point that we feel good enough about the answers to the questions.
We started out with a start date of in October.
Yes, we did.
And now we're down to
We
November.
were not able to meet that.
And now it's a couple more days.
So I firmly believe that if we as a board, dedicate and commit ourselves to meeting weekly from now until the end of the semester. That will provide the Dr. Benson and staff ample time to, have back and forth with us, to get questions answered, to meet the needs of students and families and teachers and constituents, and get us a solid plan. That's what we have, like, again, the last, a couple weeks that we lost, we were making great progress. That is what we need to do as a board, and that is how we will get a plan in place. It's not kicking the can. It's putting the rubber to the road and making sure that plan is in place between now and January. So it's a solid plan. We can do that. It's not kicking the can.
I agree.
Can I answer one question that came up? Because
Yes.
I've been looking at this.
Please.
Early on, remember that rainbow colored chart that I have health metrics in for you now. The first iteration of that, I included a key indicator or a, what's their terminology? Primary core, I'm sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
A core indicator, and it was core indicator number 3. Core indicator number 3 referenced the very strategies you all were searching for. And I have those strategies. You had asked about shields. The 5 that are included is the consistent and correct use of masks, social distancing to the largest extent possible, hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette, in other words, sneezing, coughing into your elbow, that type of thing, cleaning and disinfection, contact tracing, and collaboration with the local health department. It was those are the 5, as they call them, key mitigation strategies that are incorporated into that core indicator number 3. And it was really, you would self-assess our capacity to implement fully, so to speak, but implement in consistency. Remember, there was the same continuum was associated with each of those strategies. And when we first introduced, or when I first presented it, admittedly that social distancing was not going to be something we could implement consistently. The other indicators were things we could implement consistently. And it placed us in that moderate, almost the same area that the health metrics as of today then place us in terms of a moderate risk in terms of transmission. So I hope that helped address your question. It doesn't say here, I certainly agree, or we wouldn't have purchased them, that the plexiglass will help, but I don't think the plexiglass straight up can be substituted one for one for this key mitigation strategy, this social distancing mitigation strategy. Be my take based on what they published.
So I would also ask one thing, to Ms. Hawk's point earlier about how the date of November 5th doesn't have to be the end all be all, that we could still change that. I mean, that date is only, 9 days from now, I guess. If a change is going to be made, it seems prudent to make a change now instead of waiting until next Monday, which is 2 days before we would be planning to start. I think that's doing a terrible disservice.
So
Yep.
technically, we have a plan that doesn't seem that we all agree on is solid at this point. So we wouldn't be voting to undo the plan. We could vote to start later, being a second semester, and enhance that plan by continuing to meet to plan to bring all the others back.
I agree.
So I don't know if we would have to wait until second semester. And I mean, we've pulled the plug a few days before. I mean, we were all going to come in and do the hybrid, and then at the last minute, we decided to do 100% virtual. I mean, I think that
And there
the
was
core
data behind
indicators,
that decision.
I think, yeah, but I think that, Dr. Benson is saying that he's met the core indicators the
No, he
best
hasn't.
that he's going to be
No, he
able to do, if we can get those extra 3 teachers.
Which we've just heard is probably not going to happen
Well, I'm not,
by next Friday.
Yes,
Yeah.
in a week.
I really honestly think the question now is how we continue with the progress we've made. With Dr. Benson and his staff have continued, and not that it's just started, but that you've been making since last June or March or whenever. But we have we're well on the way to meeting the core metrics. Are we there yet? I'm not comfortable with us being there yet. And honestly, I have been struggling with this decision. I know we all have. But I just don't believe we're there.
So what about the families and the kids that are struggling virtually? What, I mean, we haven't even talked about, all we're talking about is the kids coming to school, their struggles. And, I mean, the implications of the kids that aren't coming to school are, and for a lot of parents and people, they're just as detrimental as the risk, or the risk is just as high as if they were to come to school. We haven't talked about that. We're trying to meet these.
Ms. Panthera, I said there's 118
Oh, I
students.
know you did. That's what I was saying is we're like just saying, well, they don't matter. What matters
That's
is
not
this.
at all.
And,
It's
but
Not at
that's,
all what anybody's saying.
well,
Nobody's
we
saying
haven't discussed that. I mean, we have to come up with mitigation. I think that the staff has showed us that they have great mitigation, and maybe it's possible that we could go back to some of the other students and say, would you be willing, or maybe we have to come up and say, okay, we can't have any more than X amount of students and allow that. And if there's too many, then we have to determine how many students cannot come in person. They have to be virtual. But we're just,
So you-
we can't keep kicking the can down the road. We keep saying that.
We are
maybe if
not
we push
kicking
it,
any can.
we're not coming up with any decisions.
Yes, we are.
No, I don't see 'em.
Um,
And we're not keeping any decisions.
Well,
We keep
so,
changing.
when we talk about the decisions that we've made, think about what decisions we're making. So every decision that's made affects the family.
Yep.
Affects the family, the parents, and affects all the staff members. So when a decision is changed here, people have to, they're trying to teach your kids at home, and they're making concessions for that. The teachers are being flip-flopped. I mean, how often can that happen before you get worn out? So we need to be careful about our decision we make to change decisions, because you're affecting an entire community.
yes, we are.
And we haven't kept one decision.
Well,
We've changed it every time.
Things changed that we have no control over too.
So
So I think safety has to come first for everyone. And I know some kids are struggling virtually, and I'm sorry for all parents in every situation right now and all staff. The majority of staff that I hear from are not safe, don't feel safe to return. And I think
And they have that option to stay virtual.
No, they
No,
don't.
they don't.
They don't. Somebody's got to come back and teach these in-person kids and 23 kids in the classroom. So I'd like to make a motion that we delay the start of K through 2 till the beginning of the second semester. All students remain virtual until January 15th,
15.
13th, 15th. Till the first day of the second semester.
Second.
Any discussion?
again, we've stepped outside the agenda twice tonight, making two motions, not following our own rules.
You
And-
can make a
and-
motion
and-
anytime, Mr. Collins.
You know, how can you continue this type of, this is
Anyone
not
can make a-
professional.
Anyone can make a motion anytime.
You're right, they can.
Mr. Collins, with all due respect, that's how we got into this place in the first
Well,
place. We made it,
It was
we
voted on
voted,
twice.
and we all talk about not interrupting each other.
Yeah,
We may have voted twice, but we voted on this option, this K through 2 option, when it was not an action item on the meeting. And I think perhaps as a part of our agenda formats, we need to consider how we select and make things action items, so we stop doing this.
So how many times are we going to vote on the same
Well, there's a motion and a
option when,
second
I
on
know,
it.
but so how many times are we going to keep voting on it? Okay, so then we're going to come back next week, and then maybe we have all these answers, and then we're going to vote that we're going to start the following week? I mean,
No,
we got to just come up with, this is just,
Madam-
So you just told the parents and staff to redo everything.
What have
Yep.
we done?
And I would vote nay when the time comes. I'm not going to do that to our community.
yeah, I think that the staff has worked hard, and they've done a lot, and
We agree.
they've
I
showed
agree,
that they've got
yes.
mitigation, and, you know, other than this teacher, I mean, if we're going to meet Monday, you know, I think that people would be more than happy to know Monday that they still have that option of possibly starting on Wednesday. And, you know, pulling the plug 2 days before is, in my mind, better than pulling it a week ahead and pushing it all the way out for a whole another quarter, and then having parents having to go this and the kids falling back even more. I'm not comfortable.
So when is it safe?
So there's a motion and a second.
To doing that, and we're still in discussion. We're still in discussion. We can continue with the discussion. I think that that's for every right of all of us to have a discussion.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
So,
may I comment?
Sure, Ms. Gonzalez.
So I wanted to address Mr. Collins' question about when is it safe. No one knows when it's going to be safe. We can't come up with a plan to return when it's safe. We can make a plan to return when we are confident we are as safe as possible. And I think the discussion this evening has indicated that we're not there yet. And I agree, the feedback that we have received from staff and from educators is that there are a lot of questions that we are not ready, that the change, the disruption in the middle of the semester is not necessarily worth the benefits do not outweigh the risks and the detractors for that. So,
well, I think that we're making the decisions for everybody. You know, I don't think that that's right. I think if we give people a choice and let them decide what the risk is, I'm not comfortable sitting up here telling everybody that I feel that, you know, you have to take the risk at A, B, and C. And you just said we're never going to get to that point where we're all going to be 100% comfortable with that risk. So
we're not. So if I could finish my comment.
Back to, if you go back in January, well, then that'll probably change till the end of the year. So you spent
No.
Yeah, well,
May I
$2
finish my
million
comment?
in CARES money on stuff you won't need because there'll be some type of
well, and that is a whole nother
vaccine.
thing, Mr. Collins, as you do bring up, is that we have CARES money that we have to spend by a certain time. And if we aren't in school, we can't spend that money, and we're going to have to give that money back. And, you know, I don't know how that's going to work with what we've already purchased with the plan of going to school, but I know that the Board of Supervisors is going to want a big chunk of the money back that they had already given us for the CARES. So that does bring up a good point. I don't know how that's going to work.
So we can purchase PPE and things such as HEPA filters and things that Mr. Collins himself mentioned. And we can do that when students are virtual learning at this point in time.
The purpose of that is for in-person learning.
And it will be used
It's not
in
for-
person. It will be used in person.
So you have, Ms. Chairman, you have a motion on the table.
All right, all in favor?
I'm sorry, repeat the motion.
That all students remain virtual until the beginning of the second semester.
I think that's way too far out. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Motion does not carry. Okay, so let's move on. I guess we can move on to the agenda.
At this point in time, I'd like to extend my sympathies to Dr. Benson and the staff, because we're asking impossible things of you. We're asking to enlarge and go into more detail for these things that you've already worked down to detail level. But I think we've discussed enough things tonight. I really appreciate Mr. Collins identifying the three items, and I think Ms. Gonzalez has also come up with several items that we really need more exploration about. Frankly, I don't know that it matters in a child's mind whether it's November 5th or November 25th that they come back. Now, it may matter in terms of our grading indicators and those kind of things, because I think we chose November 5th as that was part of the structural, that was already in place, sort of.
It made more sense.
Okay. So when would be the next optional possibility? If you looked at a calendar, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
No. Well, let me first clarify, make sure that, because the motion you did approve stated November 2nd. So first, I would need the board to agree that a November 5th start date, as I've communicated with you, would be more sensical. It would certainly allow teachers the election day and the asynchronous Wednesday to make sure that physically classrooms were set up to accommodate the students that would be returning then Thursday. It would also help coincide in terms of roster adjustment in our student information system, that type of thing. So for many reasons, I just ask the board to consider amending the date, the start date from November 2nd to November 5th officially. I'm not sure I understand fully your question. Is there another logical date?
Right. That wasn't an end of a marking period.
I don't know. I mean, is that, you
was.
just voted to continue on with this option. So is there a need for a next?
Well, that's, I guess my concern is that if the plan is a decent plan and it needs to be filled out further and completed to get HEPA filters and to get those teachers on board, can it not be 2 weeks out? I mean,
Well,
I think
to answer
that's
your question. I mean,
more
we can begin whenever the board decides that it's appropriate to begin. That's not necessarily hinged to a marking period.
okay,
This simply gave us a natural break of a couple days in
right,
terms of the physical adjustment
Right.
and roster. So,
right.
the students are going to continue to learn beginning of that week in a virtual fashion until we go Thursday, unless you all decide to amend that date.
Right.
But they would continue to learn through the virtual platform until such a date as we begin. If that answers your question.
So what you're asking is that you would like to change the November 2nd to November 5th. And at the time we could meet on November 2nd to discuss the CARES funding and how all that would be implemented. And in the meantime, you would help us determine, one, if we're going to have the extra teachers, two, how much the HEPA filters and some of the other PPE that Mr. Collins had mentioned, the cost of those and when they would be available. And then possibly on Monday, if we feel that everything's not going to come together by that Thursday on the 5th, then we could look at what date everything would be available and change the date at that point in time. Is that what you're kind of saying?
I would discourage waiting to that late. If you were going to entertain a different start date, to wait until Monday before the Thursday, I think from a communication standpoint with families, that would be not in their best interest because they need to plan as well. So if you were going to amend the start date, I think you would need to look at that tonight, quite frankly. While you think about that, just you mentioned the extra teachers. These are items for next Monday that you'd like information on. I've written down cleaning services. Mr. Collins mentioned cleaning services. Is that just additional supplementary
You mentioned contract
cleaning help?
services.
Or are we talking outsourcing our custodial staff?
Well, there are options there, but right now we're talking about contract cleaning.
So simply explore what cleaning services are available out there,
Supplemental.
what the costs might be.
That would be in addition to our staff.
Mhm.
Is
That's
that
what I-
correct?
Okay. And then,
Then the testing.
right, now I can bring information back about each of these. I don't know as far as tying it specifically to CARES funding or to CRF funding, that type of thing. I mean, I see that as kind of a second phase decision as to how to fund them, should the board support them. So can I bring the information back about these items, and then we can discuss, which source of funding, or can we afford it, can we not afford it, that kind of thing. I'm assuming that the funding is a secondary. If there's a want, there's a way that we can look strategically as to how to best fund it. You're really interested in the worth, the value to the division, how tightly coupled it would align with as a strategy to addressing concerns, that
Yes,
type of thing.
to
as a
increase
first
the
step.
mitigation.
So is Is there a way that we could physically, I saw the classroom at King George Elementary, the one that's on the picture here, and I think there was at least 18, maybe 20 desks in there, and it looked great. So I think our biggest issue is Sealston based on the size of the classes. Is there a way that we could actually go there and look and see how these, I think that would be very beneficial for the board to do that.
I don't need to. I've been in Sealston many, many times. And
I
Well,
don't
it's
think
just Sealston has the
honestly.
bigger
I think it'd be
classes.
Potomac would be your
The-
your older building, and the classrooms will be smaller
Will be smaller.
at Potomac.
So maybe if we could actually see it in person, I think it might be a little helpful, because you're right, King George Elementary classes are large. I know that Sealston's classes are large as well, so they're able to fit a few more students in there, but being able to see that, I think, would be beneficial. And then if we could maybe get a motion to move the date out.
To move the start
Move
date.
what date?
I mean, that's kind of what we're leaning towards, not going all the way to the next semester, but to possibly push it out.
Well, I think that Mr. Collins just talked about confusing people, and I think that would be even more confusing at this point. You only have, like I said, you have Thanksgiving break, you have 2 weeks of Christmas break, so it's not that many weeks until the next semester. If you're going to push it out again, I think at this point, teachers are prepared to go back because that was what we voted on, and that's what they thought was going to happen. I think there was some hope that tonight that could change based on the filling out of the plan that we need to do, as Ms. Hawk said. So I don't think it would be beneficial to change the date again.
I
So
agree.
then on Monday, we will, hopefully be given some more information that I'm comfortable with the mitigation that I think that the staff has made. I think that starting on the 5th is reasonable, moving it from the 2nd to the 5th, just so that we have time to get all the classrooms set up and notify all the parents and get that working. So
Is it a motion?
we need a motion. I can make a motion. I make a motion that we change the start date for the K2 in-person learning from November 2nd to November 5th.
second,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Mr. Collins?
You didn't ask for nays yet.
Okay. All right. All opposed?
Why?
I'm abstaining.
Because you keep.
You're abstaining?
I know.
This is
For the
just
5th.
the 5th.
This is the 5th. This is the
Just
change it to the 5th.
accommodate-
Do you want me to vote yay? Yay.
Yes.
Yay. Okay.
Okay. There you go.
All opposed? All right. Chair votes aye. I believe we have 4 votes, so the motion carries. So the new date to start will be November 5th. So Dr. Benson, if you could just try to finalize any of the mitigation issues that the board has spoken at our meeting on Monday. Can we go ahead and schedule that meeting for Monday at 6 o'clock?
Yep.
Here at the
Can
high
I just
school?
clarify, because I'm
Yes.
going to look into supplemental cleaning services, air filtration options, on-site testing.
Not on-site testing. A budget for testing where they can go to the 3-4 labs that are available. You basically have contracts with them so folks can go, the teachers or whoever,
Testing available.
Is that-
testing availability.
Okay.
Can
So
that be,
the county.
That's rapid
contracts
testing,
out to
correct?
Yeah,
4
Mr.
different,
I'm sorry, that's for
labs.
rapid testing.
Okay. So information about what the county provides for employees as far as rapid testing is what you're simply looking for me to bring that information.
no, how much?
so what,
How much does the county?
How much
What's
does
the
it cost?
cost?
And
How
where
many
they get it
tests do we
done,
need?
and basically how much it costs.
Okay. But for the county model, what you're saying.
Well, I'm just giving you an example.
That's the only example I know of.
Okay.
I've looked into it. So I'll look at the county. And then an update on whether we're able to procure the extra teachers. Those are the 4 elements for next meeting.
Yes.
so I was going to comment on this in my board comment, but, so I was going to say, I recommend, so I'm very excited we're going to meet next week. I was going to say, I recommend we agree now, maybe we already did, to meet weekly from now until Christmas. And then in addition, which would apply next week, could we get an update at each meeting on not only the K through 2 plan, but also the plans towards the K through 12 option, which I know we started at the last meeting with the great presentations from Ms. Collins and Mr. Boyd, but just continual updates that will help us drive towards those reopening, hopefully in January.
We've just begun. So I don't know, I'm trying to think of what an update would look like. There are 10 different groups working on 10 different aspects of it, of the proposal for you all. I don't know if, that would be a very frequent update. And really, I would rely on the facilitators or the person that is authoring that part of that proposal to come give that update. So I may have as many as 10 people giving an update on their formative doings for the week, so to speak. I mean, could you look at a less frequent than every Monday update that would, at least at the beginning, to give them a chance to get off the ground before?
Maybe when you feel comfortable that they have something to present, maybe?
That's fine. I don't want to fall short of the board's need. I can certainly inform you and share documents and work that they're doing. I don't know if you want that as part of it has to be in this setting.
So I think maybe if we give you a date that we would like to see that plan implemented, so that would give you somewhat of a deadline. Is that, I mean, we have to give them something.
We're working towards second semester.
Okay, so
you
that's,
would need it
that's
to
all.
review, at the latest December.
Right.
Since we only have one meeting in December at this point, although if we're meeting
Every Monday.
on Monday, what's that?
So there are 8 weeks. We could have 8 if we meet every Monday, there will be 8 meetings between now and that would be the 21st of December would be the last one.
Yes.
We have, I think we all agree we've made great progress in that first week, really, after the vote for K2 and the following week. And obviously, there's a lot of additional planning that goes along, and I know that probably every week sounds terribly frequent, but there's a lot to get done in 2 months. And if we want to not keep kicking the can down the road, which we're still talking about doing, with not sticking with November 1st, that's how we mitigate it. We have meetings, we get updates. I know it's a lot of work, but that's kind of the point.
Yeah, I want to clarify that group is the group that's doing the work necessarily. I would not necessarily look for the school board to do the work of the plan necessarily.
No.
I mean, this will be just a communication from those groups to you all thus far.
Right, and I wouldn't even necessarily expect that it would need to be them here briefing. I mean, people, like in a meeting, you get a update.
I try, but I don't sit on every single one of their meetings, across 10 different groups that are working. So I'd want to capture everything they're working on, and I'd really need to rely on at least some of them if you wanted a comprehensive update. Maybe it's better that we look at different aspects of the plan. Maybe there's just a couple of the subcommittees that could bring information.
Is there not is there so the couple weeks ago when we had the updates from the middle school and the high school, there was like a document that was already started, the PowerPoints with the updates where things were. I mean, I get that maybe every week there wouldn't be some landslide shocking new thing to report, but maybe we could just get, it could be a screenshot of, here, there's like a living document and this is where we were last week and we've made a couple changes and here they are. And maybe they're just highlights. And I don't necessarily think we need to be a 3-hour update. Ms. Pansier, can I finish my comment?
Yeah, no.
So, I mean, I don't see that it needs to be an overly labor intensive or cumbersome process. It could be highlights, just demonstrating the areas that are moving forward on a weekly basis.
Yeah, could I solicit from them maybe like a bulleted list from each committee?
Yeah.
And just simply assemble that into an update, a quick update for
Yes, that would be perfect.
I think that might be a way to do it.
So you're now going to give us an update from the committee, what I just heard. So can we also get an update on how they're going to address our student failure rate and our absentee rate?
Well, I think that would be germane in the recommendations they're going to ultimately make.
Can I have a PowerPoint, how that's going to work out?
So I just want to caution that we don't ask for too much information because we're going to sit here for hours and kind of do what we did tonight and just sit here and play the what if game when we don't even have all the answers. So, I mean, I mean, we did. We sat here and it's like, well, what if we don't get this and what if we don't get that? Which at the point in time, I'm kind of confused as to what the the mitigation issues that we're looking at other than the teachers. So, I mean, we have to really make sure that we just don't spin our wheels and just keep asking questions over and over again and playing the what if game. That's all.
So Ms. Pantier, we're playing the what if game and we're asking questions over and over because we haven't met routinely to get questions answered. If we meet routinely and get updates, the questions will get answered by default.
We already agreed upon that.
Talking and talking and talking.
Madam Chair, can we move to the next
Yes,
item?
thank you. All right, so moving on to the next item, we have information items. Any committee reports?
I attended the Commonwealth Governor's School meeting. They are awaiting our decisions on, in order for them to move forward on some items. They have a comprehensive plan for the students that will be coming back in person.
Great, thank you, Mr. Collins. Next item is the superintendent's report.
I'll forego that. Thank you. I think you've heard enough from me tonight.
Yep, thank you. Board comments. Mr. Collins?
So again, we meet tonight and we have a lot of good information on the table. But I would just make it clear to my constituents, the reason I'm here is to represent you. That means all of you. Whether you're a parent, a citizen, whether you're a staff member, I represent all of you. And that's my goal every single week, to do that. Not foregoing representing our students. But I just want to make it clear that the decisions made by me are from information that's received from you. So please keep emailing. I read every single email. I respond to most. Thank you for your comments is pretty much all I respond, but I read every email and every link in that email I will read. So thank you for our employees working hard. And I'm sorry that we are not where we should be. Thank you.
Ms. Gonzalez?
I thought we were going this way.
Oh, I'm just going back and forth.
Okay, so I attended the VSBA Delegate Assembly virtual, I forget if it was a training session or a frequently answered questions session, Q&A session. Anyway, in preparation for the Delegate Assembly, which is, you all know much better than me, usually takes place during the annual convention. But this year it's being held on Monday, the 16th. So in the middle of the day, so they're going to do it virtually. So they went over the voting protocol, how we're going to do that virtually through the webinar. They did some practice runs. It was pretty amusing. We got to vote on the weather. And anyway, I asked Ms. Bushrod to send out the 2020 delegate handbook in preparation, and I was hoping, I guess we'll have a couple of meetings that we could consider that, but at a minimum, I wanted to ask that be added to the agenda as just to discuss or to review the proposed legislative positions. I guess at the latest on November 9th, which is the Monday beforehand, just to review and get consensus in preparation for the assembly on the 16th.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Ms. Hawk?
Like musical
I'm just
chairs.
trying to see if y'all are awake tonight.
Oh, believe me, I'm awake. I may never sleep again.
Amen.
I think it's significant that the character education word of the month for us is responsibility. Because I think I can speak for everyone up here and everyone in the system is that it's weighing heavily. It certainly is on my shoulders. The effort that's been put in from all levels is huge. I think that we are at least trying to fill in all the gaps, and there are many. All of the plans, I have, as Mr. Collins has, I've read your emails, parents and the great many concerns about students who are doing well and others who are struggling. And I promised some of the teachers that I would at least let you know a handful of positive comments, because I have gotten many positive comments, and we don't talk about the positives as often as we should. And I do want the teachers to hear that from Mrs. C, I won't use names, says these teachers are amazing. From Mr. or Ms. Hall, good teachers have been in short supply. Please take the time to listen to these KGCS licensed professionals when implementing plans moving forward. This was from a parent. Another parent says, I have listened to my child's classes and I've been amazed at what I've seen and heard. Another parent, our teacher has been excellent, responsive, and clear. It goes on and on. The number of grateful responses to your efforts are there. We don't talk about them as much as we should. What I would like to do is get our most vulnerable children, our babies in our system anyway, back into some contact with you all. You are the essence of school to these children. The faces they see, the custodians, the lunch ladies, the school bus drivers, the teachers, the paras, and I know we won't have all of those back anytime soon, but that's a social life for so many children, and they desperately need you. But I will not make decisions that endanger with the kind of mitigation that we still need to do. I think we're getting there. I really do. I have faith that we will get there, and maybe it won't be at the start of second semester. Maybe it has to be. I don't know. You all are truly the experts, and but I want to be open to a prior opening if we're there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tolliver?
I agree with a lot of what you just said, Ms. Hawk. First, I want to thank the staff and Dr. Benson. I know you guys have been working tirelessly, and this has not been an easy situation for anybody, and it is a lot of responsibility. And we all get emails from parents that are praising teachers, and many students are doing very well virtually. And I do agree that we need to reach out to those who are not. I think that's going to be part of our process in the next few weeks, because that might need priority over everybody returning in January. Only one thing you said, Ms. Hawk, that I have to comment on, that you got an email from a parent that said we need to listen to our teachers. I don't think we've done that tonight, but on a happy note, I'd like to say that I attended virtually Dorothy in Wonderland last Friday evening from my kitchen, and it was absolutely wonderful. Ms. Wines and Danny Mack and all of her kids and crew do an awesome job, and it was really a very necessary light moment in what's otherwise been a kind of gloomy time. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tolliver. So yeah, Dr. Benson and staff, I think you guys have done a great job. I personally think that you did a fabulous job in mitigating the risk, and you know, for the exception of not knowing whether or not we're going to have that extra teacher at each school, I think it looks great. And we have been hearing from some teachers, but we're not hearing from a lot of the teachers. I think all the teachers are great. I think that, you know, it takes a special person to be a teacher. And, you know, I feel that, you know, we are working the best we can for the interest of the teachers and the students. I do know that, you know, we'll eventually get there. I think it's a slow process, and maybe I'm just wanting it to move a little bit quicker. But I would like to appoint a special committee to review our parliamentary procedures and determine if bylaws shall be developed to implement rules and principles of the King George County School Board. I think we've fallen short on that. We currently don't have Robert's rules, or not formally inducted into our policies and principles. So I would like to be a member of this committee and requested at least one other board member volunteer along with Ms. Bushrod and or Mrs. Rinko, if either one of them would like to join me. And then at that time, it'll be decided if we have any additional members of the public. I think it would be nice if we could have at least one staff member and one parent that would participate in that. So I guess moving forward, we will have our next board meeting on Monday, November 2nd at 6 o'clock here. Yes,
In regards to logistics, remember that Tuesday is election day,
yes.
and this facility, they typically come set up the day before, and then they want to secure the facility, in preparation for voting. So we would likely need to look for a different location for next week, if you wanted to maintain Monday, or you could use this location, but I would obviously recommend you use it Wednesday instead of one day. I don't mean to fly in the face of your motion you just passed. I'm just.
No, you're right.
So
This
you
special
can
week
use it
coming up.
Monday and have entrance to here through this door as opposed to that door, because that's the only room they use.
Can we
What
limit
about
the
meeting
I
on
entrance?
would, I
Friday?
would just ask
I don't
that a
wanna
member
meet
of the
on
school
Friday.
board and call Ms. Gump if that was the request. Do you still use this building? She's
Well,
very insistent that
I,
facility be locked at a certain time the day before so they can secure their voting machines for obvious reasons and the facility not be used.
but they'll be here. So I'm saying for the meeting, we can enter through this door.
Can you check on that, Dr. Benson, and let us know?
I'm saying we're not,
Either we can find an alternate place or change it to Wednesday.
I know that
We don't want
there
to
will
change
be
it to
concern
Wednesday.
about
Yeah,
using
that's
this
too much.
facility on
If we have
Monday
nowhere to meet.
evening, the day before the election.
the primary reason for a school is,
I completely agree with you, but I know from experience that
yes,
there will
I'm
be
sure
no-
that I'll hear from her also.
there'll be no flexibility.
So we could always meet in the Rivercombe building and have 3 of us present and 2 virtual, like we did before,
You could have,
Is that an option?
your agenda is dedicated to,
COVID.
from what I see, unless there's other items, then you could meet virtually. I'm not suggesting you meet virtually. I'm just simply saying we find another location, or you choose to use this space. It works well, but use it Wednesday of that week only. You could maybe then go forward with your Monday plan.
So would it be an option for this board to meet for meet at the Rivercombe and then only have the attendance virtual?
Or you could
Public
meet at
attendance
the
virtual?
Citizen Center
I thought
if
about
that,
that.
if that was the case. But I think we need to stick with Mondays.
Yeah, I agree with the Monday. I'm sorry, Mr. Collins, what did you say?
So you could
Citizen Center.
Citizen Center
Citizen Center. Oh, yeah.
or
We can find another space.
Love Thy Neighbor building, whatever that's called.
Or we can meet virtual.
Yeah, that doesn't seem.
Doesn't always work out too well. Okay.
I'll be on my best behavior.
All right, do we?
I'd like to make a motion for closed meeting pursuant to State Code Section 12.2-3711.1 for the purpose of discussion and consideration of prospective candidates for employment and assignment and resignation of employees of the school board.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now closed meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Motion?
I move the King George County School Board return to open session and certify that pursuant to State Code 2.2-3712.d, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter or only such public business matters that were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was conveyed were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the public body.
Second and certified.
Second, certify.
Certified.
Certify.
Do I have a motion to,
I make a motion to approve the personnel as presented.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Do I have
Make a
motion to adjourn?
I move
Make-
to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.